Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. Ian is here today. Hello, Ian.
What up, what up?
Ian, today is an inflection point on our futures. Where are we going? This is a pivotal moment for all of us in this movement that we have been together for, 9 years, Ian, it's been, to make the Titans great again. And today is the trade deadline day. And let me just say this. I'm just kind of kidding with that election stuff. We're not talking any election today. It's not going to happen. I remember in 2016, the election, the Trump-Hillary Clinton one, I thought nobody would be listening to the show at 5 o'clock. I figured everybody would be paying attention to the election or whatever. And I remember we had loaded phone lines the whole time. And I'm like, you know what? People want to get away from that. So that's what we're doing today. It's all football today and hockey. Barry Trotz, 5 o'clock. And I would be starting on the Predators if it were not the trade deadline day, because I am concerned. I am worried. And if you had to tell me today, right now, Jared, yay or nay, this team will make the playoffs, I have to vote nay. As much as I thought this team was a cup contender, I have to vote nay. So we'll get into that after the deadline, and Barry Trotz will join us. And as we, a couple weeks ago had to have a tough talk with Barry, I don't know what that'll be like today, but we will have Barry on the program. But it is the trade deadline, and we are 57 minutes away from the NFL's trading deadline. Now, let me start with this. First off, the NFL's trade deadline over the last however many years, and I've kind of noticed this, but it is absolutely picked up. I didn't even know that the NFL had a trade deadline when I was a kid, and I was obsessed with the Titans and the NFL. I did not even know they had a trade deadline until I started playing Madden football. And they'd be like, oh, yeah, no, you can't trade anymore. I'm like, trade deadline? In this? Really? Oh, okay. So there is a trade deadline in football, but now teams are kind of more proactive at the trade deadline. And again, we see these weird trades, right? Like, okay, I'll trade for this guy and I'll give you a fourth, and then you give me a third back, and you give me, it's never as simple for the most part as we'll trade a first round pick and get this guy. It's not that simple. But the action has picked up at least a little bit over the years across the NFL. I actually think it's funny, in these other sports, teams used to just give away first-round picks, especially in hockey. Teams would just give away first-round picks. Now they don't want to give away first-round picks. And I think part of the reason for that is the draft in all of these sports, but especially the NFL, the draft has become so popular that it's like, if we can build this thing through the draft and get our fan base excited and convince our owner that, hey, we're adding, that teams are saying, hey, let's get excited as far as the draft's concerned. Because most of these fan bases know they're kind of out of it anyways. This is just a different era. Which takes us to the Titans. So I know that everyone's been talking about every possibility that's out there. I saw Diana Rossini said over the weekend, Arden Key has been kind of on the radar. And Jeremy Fowler had a report earlier today saying teams are calling about Arden Key and Sebastian Joseph Day. Diana had a report. Teams are calling about Jeffrey Simmons. Apparently, a team picked up the phone, called the Titans about Jeffrey Simmons. The Titans had the phone to the ear and said, and hung it up. Let me tell you guys about the trade deadline and what it really means for the Titans. This is not going to be a humongous day in terms of giving the Titans a chance to be good soon. Because that's what we all want, right? Like, I know there are a lot of people out there that think that I hate the Titans. I had somebody send me a tweet the other day that said, we could win the Super Bowl and you'd still be upset. And my response to that every time is, let's win the Super Bowl and then go from there and see what it's like. I do think, Ian, that if the Titans won the Super Bowl, there'd be some bite out of the dog as far as I'm concerned.
At least for a little.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I'd ever be the same radio host, at least in this town, if the Titans won a Super Bowl. But as far as what this is all about, what we talk about every day, it is, again, we joke about make the Titans great again, but there is something to that. There is something to that's kind of what we're all here to figure out. We know they're not good now. We know they're not going to be good this season. Everybody out there except Adam in Portland, who thinks they have a 10% chance of making the playoffs. We know they're not going to be good this year, but we all want them to be good in the future. The thing is we just disagree about what it is that we think they need to do. Again, I went over this when the Titans traded DeAndre Hopkins to the Chiefs and they got a fifth in return. I went over this when the Titans traded Ernest Jones to the Seahawks and they got a fourth in return. And everybody was happy because they were at least getting something for nothing, which, again, it's not a bad thing, but it's, again, not the cure-all. We went through the Pro Bowlers of that 2019, 2018, 2020, 2021 Titans era, when we think there might have been a little bit of a Super Bowl window. And as we went through that, there was only one fourth-round pick that was used on a Pro Bowler. And that was a fourth-round pick that the Titans traded to Miami for Ryan Tannehill. That's it. Other than that, Derrick Henry in the second round, Taylor Lewan in the first round, Jack Conklin in the first round, Kevin Byard in the third round. And I can go on and on. Guys like Ben Jones and Roger Saffold, free agency. Harold Landry in the second round. Jeffrey Simmons in the first round. And I don't know if you guys have noticed, first-round picks and second-round picks aren't getting dealt today. I heard Joe talking about a second-round pick for Harold Landry to the Lions, which is good considering the fact that, last week they were talking about a first, and they ended up trading for a better pass rusher from Cleveland, and it was like a fifth and a pick swap, and it was nothing. Here's what today is about for the Titans. Today is about acquiring these lower round picks, 5th round, 6th round, 7th round, and then using those picks maybe to take a lottery shot at a player and hope they become somebody like Brock Purdy or Tom Brady or something like that. But what I think is more likely is those lower round picks have actually become currency in the NFL to allow you to get players before free agency starts. And the Titans are going to have money because the Titans have $100 million in payroll space between what they're spending this year and what they have on the books for next year. So if I were the Titans, I would be interested in taking a 6th round pick in exchange for Arden Key. But it will hurt us right now, Jared. I know. But you'll lose more games with Jalen Harrell out there probably. But at the same time, you get Jalen Harrell NFL experience, and you take a 6th round pick or a 5th round pick or a 7th round pick. You take that for next year, and it allows you in March when somebody's got a pass rusher that they just don't want to pay him $19 million, and he's upset about his contract, and there's talk, and then you use that pick. The Dallas Cowboys traded Amari Cooper to the Cleveland Browns because they didn't want him anymore. They traded Amari Cooper for a 6th round pick. Why? Because they were going to dump Amari Cooper regardless. That's what these picks are for. If I were the Titans, I would be exploring getting picks in 2026. And I know that it's not sexy if they were to turn around and trade Sebastian Joseph Day for a 5th rounder in 2026. And I'm not sure if I was Rand Carthon or Chad Brinker, I'd be excited about acquiring that pick, because as I acquire that pick, I'd be sitting back and thinking, well, someone else is probably going to be the one that uses these picks, and I get it. But if the Titans are good in 2025, for instance, which, I think even the strongest leaders of the Rand Club, the Let Rand Cook movement, Derek Mason, the president, Willie Donick, the vice president, I think even the strongest people in that movement would have to agree, like, they need to be good next year. If you're good next year, those 2026 picks, this time next year, you may be on the phone saying, hey, We really need an extra receiver, and we got an extra fifth that we got for Sebastian Joseph Day, and now we've waited on it, and then you can make the move. What you're going to accomplish today, it's really incremental. Maybe you draft a good player in the 5th round or the 6th round. I mean, everybody 2 weeks ago thought the Titans had drafted the next Darrelle Revis and Jarvis Brownlee Jr., and I think everybody's kind of come back down to earth and realized he's probably a backup corner. But you need backup corners. Or down the road in a couple of years, you'll have a need for a starting corner and you'll have a 6th round pick, and there's a team that doesn't want to pay their guy $23 million and you think you've got $23 million to pay, and you just flip that 6th and bang, there you go. But the incremental stuff, you only do that when you're on the cusp. You don't really do that when you're trying to get good again. Like, it doesn't make a difference as to whether or not you're going to be good again. What's going to make a difference is if you find a quarterback. What's going to make a difference is, do you trade down from 4 in this year's draft, go all the way to 10, pick up a 1st round pick, and draft the next Micah Parsons with the 10th overall pick in this draft? That's going to be what determines whether or not this rebuild that the Titans find themselves in, even though they never used that word once, is successful. Not what they do at the trade deadline with Arden Key and Sebastian Joseph Day. But we will keep an eye on it. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number if you've got a thought and you want to weigh in on the trade deadline. 615-737-1025. Now, the Jeffrey Simmons stuff, because there's been a lot of talk about Jeffrey Simmons. In fact, I was driving around this morning and I heard Robbie and Joe talking about Jeffrey Simmons. Then I saw Diana Rossini tweet out that teams are calling about Jeffrey Simmons. Then I saw Diana Rossini put out there that teams did call about Jeffrey Simmons and they were told no. I have thoughts as to what really the opinion needs to be inside that building about the future of Jeffrey Simmons. And you guys know me. I am not the biggest fan of Simmons in the world. We'll get to that coming up next. Stillman and Company, again, less than an hour. We are 46 minutes away from the trade deadline. It's Stillman and Company on 102.5 and 106 The Game.
How bad did you guys need this win just from a mental health standpoint of knowing that you still can go out and win?
I mean, we needed this. We deserve it. We haven't, our record, like I've been saying, our record haven't showed how good we really are. But at the end of the day, and we always into it, we come into games want to win. And we throughout the game, we've been showing good football, but at the end of the day, we just haven't won. So today it gave us the opportunity. That's just like on defense. I mean, we've been talking about the ball, and we had 3 turnovers today. Was able to rush and cover. So at the end of the day, we just have to play good football to be able to do what we do best. And like I said, I have faith in my guys up front. The quarterback got out of the pocket a couple of times, but man, and then at the end of the day, I trust our guys to get to the quarterback when it really matters.
Jeffrey Simmons after the game, and he got a game ball from the Stillman and Company program after the way he played on Sunday against the New England Patriots. Now, look, my stance on Jeff Simmons has been, I think, pretty standard. They drafted him. I didn't have a problem with it. Torn ACL is not the end of the world. The immaturity stuff when he was in high school, they seem to have kind of put their necks on the line for. Didn't have a problem with it, though I knew there was going to be kind of a rehab there. When Jeff Simmons got out there in that first year with Harold Landry and they had nobody else out there, I mean, they didn't do anything, but I couldn't blame them. They were playing 93% of the snaps, which was a problem. Then the next year, they got Bud Dupree and, more importantly, Denico Autry, and Jeffrey Simmons played like a superstar. And you had a number 1 seed in the AFC playoffs. Simmons has been a solid player. Now, again, for the $23.5 million and for all the talk about Big Jeff, I think I'd like a little bit more production. And I've always said that. I also think that the Titans, when they've gone through this transition of moving on from A.J. Brown and Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry and Kevin Byard, and they kind of had an identity crisis. And they thought Jeffrey Simmons could be the leader of the team that they needed him to be. And they put him out there in the forefront. And I don't know if that's him. I was talking to somebody today, and I said, Simmons is more like Taylor Lewan. You want him on your team because he's a good player at an important position. I mean, he's worth a first-round pick. But he's probably not a team leader. Probably better off to let the other guys be the team leaders and let Taylor play left tackle and do his podcast. So I keep hearing about all this talk surrounding the Titans and trading Jeffrey Simmons. They should trade Simmons, Jared. I heard it on Robbie and Rexroad this morning. I saw Diana Rossini tweeting about it. And then I saw Diana Rossini tweet about an hour ago. Diana said, I had one team say today we gave Tennessee a call just to check on Simmons. But we knew the answer before we even picked up the phone. It was no. So the Titans, even though they've said so to Buck and to Paul, the Titans are not interested in trading Jeffrey Simmons. And I just have to ask, for all the people that want them to trade Simmons, for all the people that are talking about, this team, we got to trade Simmons and get assets. Why? Number one, first of all, nobody on this team is untradeable. Because if you called me and offered me 2 first-round picks for Simmons, I would trade him too. But I'm using the probably expectation value that's somebody's not going to trade you a first-round pick, a high first-rounder for next year, in season to acquire Jeffrey Simmons. So if that's the case, then why would this even be a discussion? And here's the thing about Jeffrey Simmons. Jeffrey Simmons is a player that you build around, not a player that you get rid of. If you get rid of Simmons, if you're just sitting there saying, we got to tear it all down and we got to start over and as soon as you trade Jeffrey Simmons, the next thing you'll be looking for is another Jeffrey Simmons. The San Francisco 49ers in 2020 traded DeForest Buckner for a draft choice from Indianapolis. It was a first-round pick, and they ended up using that first-round pick on Javon Kinlaw. And Javon Kinlaw has produced and been injured very similarly to Treylon Burks. They tried the same thing you did with A.J. Brown and Treylon Burks. They tried that with DeForest Buckner and Javon Kinlaw, and it didn't work out for them. They've been running through defensive linemen in the interior for years, trying to get that spot figured out ever since DeForest Buckner left. The second you trade away Jeffrey Simmons is the second you go looking for another Jeffrey Simmons. And at some positions, that's easy to find somebody else. You let Derrick Henry walk, you sign Tony Pollard. That's not that difficult to replace. And there will be other running backs that would be available this year. You trade away a high-end, in their prime receiver, and it's kind of hard to find the next guy. And that leads you to paying $25 million for a guy that can't catch the ball. You see what I'm saying? Again, Jeffrey Simmons is a player that you build around. He's never going to be the best player on a championship team, and that's okay. Neither was Jarrell Casey. Neither was Delanie Walker. Think about all those guys when the Titans were bad, because once again, this is a reflection of that 2014, 2015 era. Nobody wants to admit it. I actually predicted this was going to happen when the Titans fired John Robinson. I said, look, there have been two people over 20 years that have been able to run this team. And in between, the Titans were like Moses wandering the desert with the Munchak and the Wisenhunt and the Webster and the Reinfeldt eras. And I didn't want to go back to being Moses. And here we are on election day, and the Titans are firmly out of it. So you are Moses right now in the desert. But think about those teams. And think about the Pro Bowl level players that were on those teams. Taylor Lewan, Jarrell Casey, Delanie Walker. Those are players that were still on your team when you made the playoffs in 2017. That is what Jeffrey Simmons has to be. That when you get good again, Jeffrey Simmons becomes a part of a core of players that, hey, this is a playoff caliber, competitive type team. If you go back to 2017, this was the core of the team. Again, in 2014 and 15, they were the worst team in the league. But if you go to 17, the core of that team, Lewan, Ben Jones, Casey, Byard, Delanie Walker, DeMarco Murray, Derrick Henry. You see, it's a mixture of young guys and older guys. Well, when you get young guys in here, you just have to get the right young guys. But when you get young guys in here, you want to have Delanie Walker and Jarrell Casey and Logan Ryan, and you want to have those guys on this team. So that's why, again, when it comes to the trade deadline and it comes to Simmons, to me, you don't trade him unless it's a high first rounder that's coming back for next year. So if the Raiders picked up the phone and said, we'd be interested in Simmons, and they wanted to offer their first round pick, now we're talking. But other than that, Jeffrey Simmons is a good player. Did you watch the game Sunday? Simmons might be obnoxious, and Simmons might not be as productive as an elite defensive tackle should be. I mean, again, the Kool-Aid drinking Titan fans and Titan media, the Sunshine Pumpers. I mean, I heard somebody, I had to text Robbie Stanley on Sunday because I heard somebody on the Kool-Aid show, the Titans Russian television propaganda network, start comparing Simmons' performance against the Patriots to Aaron Donald. And I was like, okay, hold up. Like, we're not doing that. But that doesn't mean Simmons isn't a good player. Simmons is a good player. And so you don't just get better by trading away good players, regardless of whether or not you're rebuilding or not rebuilding. And that's the reality of where they sit. So I keep seeing this Simmons trade. Simmons, what do you think? I'm like, no, we're not doing that. Trade Simmons. Again, the problem with the Titans is they don't have enough good players. So by trading away the good players that have contracts past this, that's not going to make you better. The problem is you got too many bad players like Chigakonkwo and Nicholas Petit-Frere and Scarbinis. That's the problem. It's like somebody called in yesterday, said, we should trade Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard's the best player in the offense right now, which, by the way, I did say in training camp was going to be the case. 615-737-1025. Ian, were you shocked by this? You will never guess who is breaking down the trade deadline. Were you surprised, Ian?
A little bit, yeah.
I was shocked this morning. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5 The Game.
And I am thrilled to be joined by a two-time Super Bowl champ and former NFL general manager John Robinson, making his debut right here on HQ with us. And John, just given that this is our first time chatting, I got to start things off by picking your brain, if you will. I would love for you to just give us a little bit of insight into what it's like this time of year for that front office. You got the trade deadline staring you in the face, and you're trying to find ways to strengthen your roster.
Yeah, this next couple days are going to be really hectic around the NFL and the offices. You've really got three categories of teams. You've got the teams that are buyers that are kind of in the hunt here in November, making a push in December, trying to play football in January. You've got the sellers, teams that are kind of out of it and looking to stockpile draft picks. And then you got the teams that are just kind of sitting pat, unless you pick up the phone and call. And they will listen to you. So I think that most of the staffs have done their homework and they know the players that are available. But really, it's about the GMs. I mean, the GMs are getting on the phone. They're texting back and forth, talking with ownership. It's a team decision. So it's the head coach, it's the general manager, and it's the owner when you consummate these trades. But it's on the GMs now to really pick up the phone and call and see which players are truly available. And try to craft the deal. I tried to make a deal my first year right at the deadline in 2016, and it got right to the end, and we just couldn't quite pull it off. But it was anxious times.
John Robinson doing analysis? I mean, Ian, were you prepared for that?
Not really, no.
This morning, I was on YouTube and I did a search for trade deadline, just seeing what was out there. Did ESPN have some stuff where some of their analysts talked about it? And I saw something, CBS Sports HQ, which I believe is like that free channel. You know how if you buy a new TV nowadays, it's like free Samsung channels and free LG channels and free, I think. Emily Proud's going to kill me if I get this wrong because this is what she does now. I think it's like the free channel, where it's just constant CBS Sports analysis all the time. How do they make money on it? I don't know. But Rick Spielman is often featured as one of the analysts for CBS stuff and CBS HQ. So I saw a video that said former general manager, and I was like, oh, maybe it's Rick Spielman. And I clicked it, and it was John Robinson. So let me just say this. Number one, I want to know what that 2016 trade that he almost made that he didn't make. I kind of want to know what that is. And then number two, I really believe this, and fans are going to hate it, and I actually think J-Rob will be pretty good on TV if that's what he wants to do, TV, radio, whatever it may be. I think he'll be pretty good. And I do kind of wonder, what he thinks of the state of the Titans. And now if he's doing media, maybe somebody can ask him that kind of question there. He had a trade that he mocked up, by the way, in his CBS Sports video that he did, where I think it was Azeez Ojulari from the Giants to the Cardinals. And I think it was for him and a fifth for a third. And those are kind of the trades we're seeing right now. So the trades that are coming out right now, to me, aren't massive moves. Khalil Herbert to the Bengals, Zadarius Smith to the Lions, Mike Williams to the Steelers. Like, Mike Williams is cooked. Marshawn Lattimore to the Commanders, that might mean something, and they did trade a lot of picks in order to make that deal.
They don't have any.
So everybody was talking about that. It's not, so I don't watch Washington. So they have no help at corner, is what you're telling me?
I don't know exactly their corners, but their pass defense is not good. I do know that, yeah.
The Rams in the last 15 minutes have traded corner Tre'Davious White to the Ravens. Baltimore swapped 7th-round picks with the Rams in order to acquire Tre'Davious White. And if I'm not mistaken, wouldn't we expect Baltimore's 7th-round pick to be lower than the Rams? So the Rams are taking a worse pick in order to trade Tre'Davious White. And I also, by the way, LOL, because somebody said earlier today on the YouTube chat, and I heard Joe talking about this, somebody, said the cap is fake with a smiley face or a laughing emoji. The cap is 100% fake. And one of my favorite things was that during the offseason, people were telling me about the doom that was incoming for the Buffalo Bills. The Bills are in cap jail, and you will see what happens to the Bills. And I think the Bills are doing fine. They had to cut Mitch Morse, the center who went to Jacksonville. And again, they did that because they had a guard they were ready to plug in at center, and they had a guy that they drafted last year that they were ready to plug in at guard. That's what good teams do. So they cut this center, and they cut Tre'Davious White, who's always injured and never plays, And everybody told me, see, Jared, this is proof that the cap is real. And I said, no, they cut guys that make money that stink now. And Mitch Morse in Jacksonville stinks. And Tre'Davious White was going to get cut if they didn't trade him to the Ravens, and he stinks now too. 7th round pick swap. Woo! But yeah, because the Saints suck, all of a sudden the cap's real. Ian, you were in that text
Yes, I was.
thread.
Uh-huh.
Did you? So I'm going to lay this out because Joe brought this up this morning about the text thread. So Joe sends a tweet from Benjamin Solak, who, I mean, I've known Ben Solak for 10 years. And he's fine, but he's no different than any other media guy. I remember when we first started doing Jared and the GM, there was some CBSSports.com list that we had that we talked about. Ian, this might have even been before you came on board.
Maybe.
But there was some list, and Floyd made me research the guy who wrote the list. And he was like, where did he coach?
Sounds about right.
I've kind of always had something like that. Now it's like, oh, well, Peter King thinks, well, who cares? Now, if Peter King's reporting it, that's different. But if Peter King thinks it, who cares? So Benjamin Solak sends out a tweet that's like, I'm begging the Saints, stop kicking the can down the road. This is what's happening to you. Joe Rexrode sends that tweet to me, Ian, Caroline, and Robbie. The whole group chat. If you got left out of this, I feel sorry for you that Joe didn't include you. And Joe's like, see the Saints, proof of the cap. And I said, the reason the Saints suck is not because they spend too much money. The problem is that they spend that money on Derek Carr, who stinks. I don't know if you guys saw Michael Thomas, who was just lighting Derek Carr up after he got Chris Olave sent to the hospital on Sunday. But Derek Carr kind of sucks. And the Saints paid him $100 million. And every single text back, Ian, Joe never really responded to the point that I made to refute his point. He'd make a point, I'd refute his point, and then he would just kind of talk off to the side about it, but wouldn't actually address the cap. My thing about the Saints and the cap is the reason the Saints stink is because Drew Brees retired and they haven't figured it out at quarterback. The Denver Broncos had Peyton Manning and they won the Super Bowl, and then Peyton retired and they haven't figured it out at quarterback. They have not figured it out. So, I mean, I'm sorry, but
Saints have more holes than just quarterback, but
you know why they're bad. If Drew Brees was their quarterback, do you think that they'd be 2-6?
No.
See, again, that's what this all goes. And so it's like, oh yeah, the Saints, they never have cap space. That's why the Saints suck. No, the Saints suck because the Saints are signing bad players. That's why the Titans and the Patriots had all the cap space. And I watched them play on Sunday and they both stink. The cap's fake. Denver, they've been the exact same as New Orleans. Irrelevant since their Hall of Fame quarterback retired. Is it because of the cap? New England, they've been irrelevant since their Hall of Fame quarterback left that team and went to another team. Is it the cap? But Joe never responded to any of that. Joe would just be like, oh, ha, ha, bring up the Broncos now. I'm like, I think it's a pretty fair point. Peyton Manning retired. Their quarterbacks have been Trevor Siemian and Paxton Lynch and Joe Flacco and Drew Lock and Russell Wilson and Bo Nix. You see the problem? The Seahawks, they're not in the cap jail, but they stink. Why? Because Geno Smith sucks. That's why. So, again, if you guys want to sit here and talk about the cap, I mean, you guys are kind of crazy. Mike texts into the text line, and our phone line is driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and says, so now Jerry Jones has come full tilt. First, it was get rid of all of everybody and tear them down, and everybody will rebuild, and now he's out here not getting – I don't even know what this – I don't know what this guy's saying. If you want to talk about what Jerry Jones did today – I mean, again, all these trades that are getting made, I saw this come across. The Dallas Cowboys traded a 4th-round pick for Mingo, for Jonathan Mingo, the receiver who I think sat at Ole Miss in the second year. The question I have about this trade makes no sense, and everybody around the country is trying to figure out what Jerry's thinking to make this trade, and I can promise you one thing happened. Jerry, there's something that happened, whether it was when they were scouting him, or they played a preseason game against him, or they had joint practices against him, or they played a real game against him, and all of a sudden, it's like, well, I want him. I want him. Because this is the exact same thing he did for Trey Lance last year. They traded a 4th-round pick because of Trey Lance, and then all of a sudden, Jerry was like, I want him. Nobody understood it. He's not going to play, but I want him. So that's what I think happened there. If you want to ask what Jerry Jones is thinking, that's what it is. Somebody in the YouTube chat said, ask the Saints if the cap is fake. Saying the cap is fake is like saying climate change isn't real because it snowed. Well, what happened to Rhett Bryan and everybody else out there that said the Buffalo Bills are going to be ruined by the cap? They won't be able to keep Gabriel Davis. They won't be able to. I think Buffalo's pretty good. I mean, I hate to say it. I think Buffalo's doing okay. So I guess the cap doesn't apply to them. It only applies to the Saints. And the only team that's bad, well, I mean, Cleveland's bad too, but the only team that's bad and everyone immediately says, it's the cap, is the Saints. Nobody looks at the Titans and says, oh, it must be the cap. Nobody looks at the Patriots and says, oh, it must be the cap. The Dolphins, the Raiders, everybody else who sucks, Carolina. Nobody looks at them and says, oh, they must suck because of the cap. It's only the Saints. Could it not be that the Saints kind of suck and the players they've gone out and gotten also kind of suck? I mean, again, they paid Derek Carr $100 million. And the Jets, again, the crowning jewel of the NFL, the Jets were interested in him kind of if Aaron Rodgers didn't go there. And they paid Derek Carr $100 million. Derek Carr got dumped by the Raiders, who were like, no, we don't want you to play quarterback for us anymore. No, thank you. Come on. 615-737-1025. We'll get into your phones at 615-737-1025 on the trade deadline. And the single dumbest take I have heard about the trade deadline maybe ever. And that's saying something because I have heard some dumb stuff in my life. We will do that next, and we'll check in on the latest as well on the trade deadline. Tomorrow, it's your chance to participate in Preds Pick to Click. If you correctly guess a Preds player that scores a goal in the Preds game tomorrow night, you win a pair of tickets to an upcoming Preds home game. Participate with Robbie and Rexro tomorrow morning at 8:45 a.m. This week's Nationals best deal is from Black Rabbit. Black Rabbit is a great spot to enjoy some Nashville vibes with craft cocktails, delicious food, and live music just steps from iconic venues. It's perfect for a night out. I actually think I went there a couple of years ago, right before it was during the COVID years when the hockey, there were only like 5,000 people in the building. We went to Black Rabbit before the game, had a great time. Steps from iconic venues. It's perfect for a night out. Snagging a $50 gift card for only $25 is a fantastic way to experience it. Get yours now at theGameNational.com/deals while supplies last. So again, we have about 9 minutes to go until the NFL's trade deadline. The Titans really only have a handful of assets. Quandre Diggs would have been an asset. He's hurt. That's no longer an option. Arden Key is the one I think everybody keeps circling. Sebastian Joseph Day is a name now that has come up, I guess, a lot. And I would throw in a guy like Daniel Brunskill. Maybe somebody would be interested in an extra offensive lineman, although he's got a hefty little price tag. So I'm not sure that's the case. And yes, when I refer to the price tag, I mean the actual money, not the cap. I don't know what the trade talks are when it comes to Arden Key and Sebastian Joseph Day. Azeez Ojulari for the New York Giants apparently is off the trading block. And we saw what Zadarius Smith went for and Preston Smith went for. And the reality was it's not very much. That being said, I'll take whatever I can get for both guys. So if the last possible offer that is sitting there on the table when it comes to Arden Key or Sebastian Joseph Day is a 7th rounder next year, I'd still do it. A 6th rounder next year, I'd still do it. Because again, sure, you can draft a great player in the 6th round. It's happened before. It's not very likely. I would do it, because these are these little trade chips that you have next year or this March when you've got $100 million to spend. And we look at the free agent market and we see, there's not really a good right tackle out there to sign, but somebody has a veteran right tackle that they're paying $10 million to that they don't want because they want to draft the right tackle. And so you just flip that 6th rounder for Sebastian Joseph Day to a team that really didn't want to keep this right tackle anyways. Now you got it. There you go. That's what the Jets did acquiring Morgan Moses by swapping 4ths with the Ravens. So whatever you can get for Arden Key, whatever you can get for Sebastian Joseph Day in the next 6 minutes, you need to get. Now, while we wait for the trade deadline, we have to talk about Joe Rexrode. And it should be noted, Jared versus Joe, because the Predators are on early. We'll be at 4 o'clock tomorrow. But Joe Rexrode. Ian, should we read the text message Joe sent mad about the last segment, or should we play the stupid thing that Joe was talking about today?
Well, whatever you'd like.
Let's start with the stupid thing Joe was talking about today. Sometimes people just say stupid things, and it's like, well, you got to let it go. And then sometimes it's so obnoxious that it has to be addressed. I have met 1,000 Titan fans, probably more than that, thousands of Titans fans. And they ask me all the time about quarterback. We bought a hot tub. The guy who sold us the hot tub said to me when I was on the phone, he was like, what's going on? What are we going to do with Levis? Happens every day. Nobody, not one person on the planet outside of Joe Rexrode has authored the idea that the Titans need to trade for Hendon Hooker. And yet this morning, here was Joe's reasoning to get rid of Harold Landry for an unreasonable return and what he really wanted from the Lions in the deal.
You could also make the case, why would you trade a guy like Landry? He's a foundational guy. You have to have some good players. You take him out, and then you totally have to start over on the edge. Like, you have to completely start over.
Yep.
And I agree. That's why I'm only taking a primo pick. And also, I'm getting freaking Hendon Hooker. I'm getting freaking Hendon Hooker out of this deal.
Hey,
I'm telling you. And I know people are going to laugh like, oh yeah, the Vols fans. No, man. Look, you bring him in, you send them Mason Rudolph. Mason Rudolph can be the reliable 2 to Jared Goff if he gets hurt or whatever, if he misses a game or two, and then you have at least a competition, and then you can do something else too at quarterback, but at least then you would have a competition. I still think Hendon Hooker is going to be a good quarterback in the NFL. Laugh at me if you will.
Okay, so I have never done those psychedelic drugs, but I was in Canada a couple weeks ago, and we drove by a place called like the Mushroom Depot or something like that. And it said in the window, because again, the laws in Canada are different, psychedelics. And when I hear that, I think of Aaron Rodgers doing his ayahuasca retreats or whatever. And I'm like, at some point when it's legal, and I think I would want to try and see what happens doing something like that. That's got to be what Joe's on. To sit there this morning and think you can get a second-round pick for Harold Landry, when, again, better players are going for like fifth-round picks with a return of a sixth-round pick. And he's got to have Hendon Hooker, the Vols quarterback. Meanwhile, Robbie is sitting there, if you're watching the YouTube stream, in a UT Vols sweatshirt and a UT Vols hat. Like, Robbie looks like, with the attire that he has on, if you were to typecast a bald hillbilly, like, it would be Robbie, the way he was dressed on the YouTube stream with all the Vols stuff. And even Robbie's like, yeah, I don't know. Joseph sitting here talking about Hendon Hooker? Really? Hendon Hooker? Oh, my God. That's a real grown-up conversation. Also, we talked about how Joe is blaming the cap on why the Saints stink. And for some reason, the Bills, they were in cap jail too, but I guess nobody has a problem with that. Joe says, God, you're dumb. This was a text to me and Ian. God, you're dumb. Saying the cap is real, which is obvious and known by anyone with a brain, is not saying the cap is the only thing that matters and dictates everything and overwhelms all good and bad choices and determines whether or not teams are good or bad. In all caps. All I have to say is, so does it matter? Or does it not matter? Because, he talks about the Bills and says, but see, this is what you have to do. You have to make up a BS argument on the other side as you die and the cap is fake hill. Truly sad for the record. Yes, some of the Bills' moves were cap related, to which I said, so Tre'Davious White, who just got traded for a pick swap in the 7th round, said, so he doesn't suck? It's like, so when they cut Tre'Davious White, and everybody out there was sitting there saying, hey, when it comes to the Bills, they have to get rid of Tre'Davious White because of the cap. And then he goes to the Rams and he sucks. You telling me that the Bills didn't say, no, we don't want to pay a guy who's never healthy and stinks $10 million or what? 615-737-1025. We'll see if the Titans make a deal in the next minute or not. Plus, some people are already mad about a deal they've made. We'll get to that next. I'm going to company 1025 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3, The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios on trade deadline day, and it appears that the Titans are not making a trade today. Arden Key was rumored to be on the block. It looks like he will stay. Sebastian Joseph Day was rumored to be on the block. It looks like he will be staying because Adam Schefter tweeted out 1 minute ago that there was one final trade at the deadline. The Texans traded defensive tackle Khalil Davis to the 49ers in exchange for a 2026 7th-round pick. So between that and the Rams trading Tre'Davious White to the Ravens and the Steelers acquiring Preston Smith and the Steelers adding Mike Williams and some of these other moves that were made, it seems as if the Titans will not be making any other moves. Though, again, the way that this technically works is if you called it into the league at 3 o'clock, then they'll proceed and they'll allow it in. And we shall see. I don't expect there to be some kind of surprise trade. If Schefter says this is the last move and it's the move the Texans made, I assume that it is probably the last move. But that's okay. Because just like I was talking to Ian about during the break, I voted early. So I didn't go on election day. I have too much anxiety to vote on election day. So I had to vote early. And I think the Titans at the trade deadline did their trade deadline work early. Ernest Jones for a 4th, DeAndre Hopkins for a 5th. And let's just call it how it is. It's a 5th for DeAndre. And DeAndre balled out. The conditions, the likelihood that that becomes a 4th are almost nil. And there's some Titan fans after watching DeAndre ball out yesterday for Kansas City on Monday Night Football, and after watching Jonathan Mingo go for a 4th-round pick today, and some of these other receiver deals, Mike Williams, who is no DeAndre Hopkins, going for a 5th-round pick as well, there are some Titan fans that are very, very upset about the fact that the Titans only got a 5th in exchange for DeAndre Hopkins. Ian, I don't want to throw you under the bus, but you seem to be one of them.
Well, I was just saying, Mike Williams, the wide receiver from the Jets, was traded to the Steelers for a 5th-round pick. Hopkins is better than him. And I feel like Kansas City is desperate for a wide receiver. You waited until deadline spur action. You get more when you wait closer to the deadline.
So your beef was that they didn't wait.
Correct.
That they traded DeAndre 2 weeks ago and that they should have waited. And they should have, again, we see these other teams that wanted receivers. Maybe when the Titans called 2 weeks ago, they picked up the phone and they said, no, thank you. That now they would have said, no, we have to make a deal. So let's go ahead and do it.
What if Kansas City would have lost one of those games? Would that have amped it up a round?
I'm going to tell you right now. I'm torn. I don't know how to feel about this. On one hand, there's a part of me that thinks, look, to think that you would have gotten more for DeAndre is probably a pipe dream because, again, the picks that get exchanged this time of the year, if you're lucky, it's a 3rd. 5 years ago, it wasn't like that. Mohamed Sanu went for a 2nd at the deadline and did nothing for the Patriots. But there have been too many instances like that now the picks that get dealt this time of the year are 3rds with 5ths coming back. 5th, 6th, 7th, things like that. And yet, on the other hand, when you put it the way Ian put it, they didn't wait. They could have waited. They didn't wait. And Mike Williams went for the same thing that DeAndre went for. And let's remember, Kansas City is probably going to the Super Bowl, which means it's going to be the 31st or 32nd pick of the 5th round for DeAndre Hopkins. It's hard to argue when Carolina gets a 4th for Jonathan Mingo and you get basically a 6th for DeAndre Hopkins. And yet at the end of the day, like last night when DeAndre was scoring touchdowns on Monday Night Football, I wasn't watching the game and thinking, oh my God, they only got a 5th for him. So I can't kill him because, again, it wasn't like something that I said ahead of time, like, no, don't do that. I didn't say that. And I didn't believe that. But it is easy in hindsight to look at it. And I'm not even using hindsight the way people use it. People use the word hindsight. Well, it's easy in hindsight. As if, oh, yeah, you're only saying this because. But sometimes hindsight is necessary. So in hindsight of the fact that Mike Williams went for a fifth, and Mike Williams is not catching 2 touchdown passes, and the ball over the middle that DeAndre caught last night, the ball in overtime last night where DeAndre kind of juked the guy back and then ran up the field. And you got the same thing, probably even worse. And Jonathan Mingo, who most people don't even know who that is, Jonathan Mingo went for a fourth because Jerry said, "Ow, won't he?" I mean, Ian, I see where you're coming from with this.
I'm just, it just came across my mind. Like, hey, Hopkins looking good. We knew he was still looking good. He's still a Hall of Fame caliber receiver. Sure, he's lost a half a step, but he can still catch. And you pair him with with Mahomes, it's like automatic. Those passes are just so much more accurate than the passes he was getting here from Levis and Rudolph, that it's just like, I don't know, money in the bank. And they got him for, nothing.
Do you think and this is the thing that, again, we're not privy to this. If the Titans had said 2 weeks ago, like, no, we're not trading him for a fifth. We're not trading him for a conditional fourth. We're trading him for a fourth, period. Do you think Kansas City would have eventually budged by 11 minutes ago? And I don't know.
I don't know either, but I tend to think yes.
Then is that bad GMing?
Well,
is this another instance where we look at the Titans and we say, you got one pulled over on you? Is this another one of those ones where it's very easy to look back on it and say, well, hold on now. Again, Rand told the Tennessean he wants to flip the roster with these trades they've made, with the 4th, 5th, and 7th round picks they've added. Boy, that 7th, that's going to be a big difference. Should this not have been a 4th that was a conditional 3rd if he plays 60% of the snaps and goes to the Super Bowl?
I feel better about
your
that.
3rd back.
Yeah, I feel better about that.
For L'Jarius Sneed, who, again, we talk about bad GMing, is just sitting away on the bench. I mean,
Hopkins is a better player than a 5th round pick. I know his situation as far as, his age and the contract and all that kind of stuff plays into it. But if you take just the player and the fit and the potential impact he could have with that team, I think it might be worth more than a 5th.
I'm still torn. Because on one hand, when they made the trade, I wasn't against it. But on the other hand, it's hard to believe that if the market for Mike Williams was a 5th, that you shouldn't have gotten better for DeAndre. That if Jonathan Mingo was a 4th, that you couldn't have done better for DeAndre. And if Kansas City was going to use DeAndre the way they're using him, he's their number 1 wide receiver.
Yep.
He is their number 1 wide receiver, and it was obvious to anyone watching the game last night. You don't think they would have eventually traded more? This reminds me of a story. 2019. I was going to the CMA Awards. And the CMA Awards, they start at like 7 o'clock or whatever. And we were doing the show, and I asked Floyd if we could tape the last 30 minutes of the show so that I could get on with my life and go to the CMA Awards. And Floyd said no. And I was like, what? No? I'm like, what are we doing here? So we had a bet that we had made at the beginning of the season. This was the first year for Brian Callahan and Zach Taylor with the Bengals. And Floyd had given me an over-under of 6 and it bet me $100. And I took the under. And I was feeling very comfortable at that point in time about the under, as you would if you took under 6 for the Titans right now. And Floyd said the only way he taped the last 30 minutes of the show is if I agreed to waive the bet. I said, okay. Ian, as soon as I said okay, he looked at me and goes, ha, 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 ha.
Gotcha.
So easy.
Sucker.
He's like, so easy. If I was negotiating with you, I'd have bent you over a barrel. And he walked out. And I was just like, oh, okay. And so when I, again, the D-Hop, like, he's their number one receiver. I do wonder what the tenor of those conversations were like. Now that we see what the market rate is for receivers, and the fact that, again, you got market, but your house is in a better neighborhood than Mike Williams. And that I'm not so sure about. 615-737-1025. Add that to the list, 615-737-1025. And there's another thing that DeAndre Hopkins did yesterday that I'm just tired of seeing. It happens way too much, and we got to figure it out. We'll do it next. Stillman & Company on 1025 The Game.
Protection, back of the end zone, Hopkins. Got him there and got him in. Hopkins at the bottom. His way. Touchdown, Kansas City.
Am I the only one that thinks that Nick Westbrook-Akine and DeAndre Hopkins might be the same guys? So all they're out there doing is catching touchdown passes. 2 TDs last night for DeAndre. So before we get again to your phones about, did the Titans undersell it? A 5th round pick for DeAndre Hopkins. Before we get to the phones on that, I do want to say, add DeAndre to the list of guys that the Tennessee Titans move on from that play significantly better somewhere else. Now, it's easy to understand why he'd play better in Kansas City, given the fact that he went from Will Levis to Patrick Mahomes. But this, again, it's almost a constant now. Everybody leaves the Titans, and as soon as they go somewhere else, they instantly play better. Fulton, Molden, Malik, Derrick Henry, everybody. And again, it's not like I think all of these organizations are just great organizations. But I think it tells us something is wrong here. And I'm not sure I can put my finger on what it is exactly, but something is wrong when every single player that you let go of goes somewhere else and immediately plays like a better player. I mean, I'm afraid that if you were to move on from Nicholas Petit-Frere, a.k.a.
PT.
If you were to move on from PT, that he would turn into Trent Williams.
Nah, not with big coach.
I mean, even they're not impressing me the way that they were supposed to. Everybody leaves the Titans, and everybody plays better with the exception of Nate Davis, who Mike Vrabel hated and went to the Bears and apparently stinks. But that's a problem now. That's probably, if I was one of these teams and I needed a quarterback and I thought I could contend, I might want to go to the owner and say, we need some more money to pay Ryan Tannehill, because if everybody leaves the Titans and plays much better, just imagine how good Ryan Tannehill could be for us.
Someone be calling about Levis this offseason.
Levis might be good somewhere else. I don't know. Somebody has to explain it to me because I don't understand. Phone line driven by WilsonCountyHunter.com at 615-737-1025. Jordan says, before he was traded, I said give Hopkins to Kansas City for a third because they were desperate at receiver. I let my angry feelings go because no one argued he was worth more. But I'm back to being ticked off, but trying to stay calm by telling myself Mingo only went for a fourth because he's younger and Jerry Jones always overpays. The question is this. Now that we know how much Kansas City needed him, and I have to believe that Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes knew, like, all right, we're going to get D-Hop, and then we're going to throw him the ball every play. Because that's exactly what they did last night. They barely even waited. It was like, we're going to get – the Titans, for some reason, they trade for Jerome Baker. He's got to take 3 weeks to get out on the field. But when it comes to Kansas City, it's like, put him in there, and DeAndre looks like DeAndre. As Mike Tomlin said before they played the Titans last year, he goes, it's the same old D-Hop. And that was the same old D-Hop yesterday.
Did you see what Hopkins tweeted out today?
The one about the celebration?
No. He it was a
the Brady picture?
Brady picture with Randy Moss and a ...
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you, when DeAndre did the Remember the Titans celebration yesterday, I'm glad he clarified this morning that he didn't mean any disrespect to it. Because when he did the Remember the Titans celebration, I didn't know if that was a diss or a sign of respect.
I thought it was a sign of respect.
Well, he said it was a sign of respect, so
Okay.
I'll take his word for it.
I buy it, yeah.
But again, I go back to the original premise, which is this. If they had called, and I don't know who called who about D-Hop, but if they had called and the conversation got turned to D-Hop, and you knew what the situation was. You knew the Chiefs were Super Bowl contenders who had nothing at wide receiver. You knew D-Hop wanted to play there. You knew Mahomes wanted D-Hop on the team. And they're sitting there calling you, wanting to make the deal. And you know Kansas City is a cheap organization that does not like to pay players, do you not hold out and say, no, we want a third? Knowing now what we know about what Kansas City decided, how they were going to employ Hopkins. They're like, hey, D-Hop, you're number one. Because if he really is their number one receiver, and you are a Super Bowl team, which they are, what good does the extra third-round pick do you? Like, this is the window. This is what you're going for, the three-peat. Could you imagine telling Michael Jordan, like, hey, Michael, we're not going to make a move as we try to go down the stretch here with the Chicago Bulls and win our fourth title because we want to make sure that we have a second-round pick so that we can draft another Stacey King? I don't think so. So I am starting to lean into the camp that the Titans should have waited longer on the DeAndre Hopkins front. One texter says, is Amy not pissed seeing these trades where the teams aren't retaining millions of dollars? You have to remember that it's the Chiefs. And the Chiefs are a cheap team because the Chiefs, I mean, think about this. The Hunt family has the best team in the league right now on a year in and year out basis. They have the best quarterback. They have the best coach. They have one of the best fan bases. They have one of the best game day atmospheres. Everything in Chiefland is great. It's so good that Chad Boger, the owner of the radio station in Kansas City, he was telling me at the Super Bowl, because I used to work for him in Louisville, and he was telling me that he's like, yeah, I'm going to fly back immediately after the Super Bowl. I got invited to the Chiefs party, but I'm not going to go because I've already been a couple of times, and it's fun, but I'd rather get on and get out of Vegas the first thing in the morning. And that's how used to winning they are. So with all of that positivity, their owner got an F- in the NFLPA players report card. You know how you do that? You be cheap as hell. That's how you do that. Like, there's a fight right now between Kansas City and Missouri. Like, they may leave the state to go play in Kansas because they want a new stadium. And they're raking in the cash with all those sellouts and everything else, but they want a new stadium. I was at Arrowhead this summer. It's fine. You don't need a new stadium. But no. They need a new stadium because F-. So you say, like, you know, is Amy mad? Is Amy mad that all these other teams aren't retaining salary? Amy, I think, knew who she was dealing with. The Hunt family might be even cheaper than her family when it comes to, you know, just the tiniest dollars. Although Amy has shown that she'll be willing to spend, unlike her father's reputation. So I don't think Amy's mad about that. I think if you're Amy, I think you're mad about the fact that, wait a minute, just like Ian said, Jonathan Mingo went for a fourth, and Mike Williams isn't D-Hop. Mike Williams is not going to the Steelers and is not going to catch 2 touchdown passes next week. And yet, they got the same. Their pick's going to be better because Kansas City's not very good. Because Kansas City's very good and the Steelers aren't as good as them. And Amy's probably looking at that thing and, wait a minute, hold up. I got the same as Mike Williams went for? That's why she should be upset. If that's Ian's convinced me to be upset about this. And so
that was not my intention. So, but
you have absolutely convinced me to be upset about the DeAndre Hopkins trade, because it's like, wait a minute, hold on. They're using him like a number one receiver. This was their plan when they traded for him. And the conditions on the pick becoming a fourth are so unlikely. And again, remember who you're trading with. You're trading with the Chiefs.
They have to make it to the Super Bowl is one of the conditions anyway. So it automatically becomes pretty much a 5th rounder, even if you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't even think of that. You're trading with the Chiefs.
They have to get to the Super Bowl, right? In order for that
yeah,
condition.
And he has to play 60% of the snaps, which he's not going to.
If
they're gonna be locked into a playoff spot, and they're going to give him the last week of the year off anyways. There's no chance of him playing 60% of the snaps. None. And they got to get to the Super Bowl. And then it becomes a fourth. But again, it's the Chiefs, which means it's really a low pick. Ian, you've got me worked up.
Sorry, people.
I was not mad about this morning, but Ian makes a very valid case for why this was a bad. You didn't have to make the trade right away, and it's clear.
Unless Hopkins
after
really
seeing Kansas City
went to him, them and said, "Hey, I don't want to wait.
I don't work for you. You work for us."
I know Carthon at that point could be like, "Hey, give us another week. Maybe we think we could get another pick. Maybe Hopkins would be okay with that. Maybe they were worried they would make another move. I don't know."
Again, if Diop came to me and said, "I want to make the trade now, take a 5th rounder," I'd say, "You work for us," not the other way around. They got hosed. Oh, God. Oh. 615-737-1025. More of your phones. Plus, there's a text in here that I find very interesting that I'm going to say the answer is no, but I'm not going to rule it out either. We'll get to it next. I'm in a company, 1025 The Game. Want to tell you about Window Nation. I absolutely love Window Nation. They've come out to my home and they've taken good care of my friends. And I'm telling you, they can do the exact same for you. And experts say that heating costs are increasing up to 23% this winter. And it will be cold soon enough, though. I did walk outside today and I was like, man, it is seasonably perfect, which is also meaning it's time to get those windows replaced before it does get that cold. So with the heating cost increasing by 23% this winter, if your windows aren't from Window Nation, your money is literally going out of your non-Window Nation windows. And Window Nation has some of the best insulated windows, so your heat will stay inside. And right now, they've got a great deal to keep the heat inside or the AC inside this summer when it gets hot out, which is 50% off. Again, that's 50% off of Window Nation's amazing windows. Plus, you can save even more with 0% interest for 5 years. Think about that. No interest for 5 years. Hurry, because the sale ends November 30th. So schedule your fast in-home estimate right now by calling 866-90NATION or visiting windownation.com. That's 866-90NATION and windownation.com.
Will Rand talk?
No, Rand talk. That's funny.
Will
Rand talk.
Amy talk?
Rand's under a rock somewhere. Rand's never going to. Rand will talk. I'm risking it right now, but Rand will talk once a year at, in a meaningful conversation at the owners' meeting.
I said 35-65 he talks this week. Am I
35-65?
What are you talking about?
There's a 2% chance that Rand will talk.
We got a lot of disagreements on percentages.
I'll request Rand today, and they'll say, no, Callahan will speak on behalf of this. We have a better chance of Brinker talking.
Hey?
Because
Brinker
understands that it's important for somebody for there to be some expression of something. I don't think he'll talk either. But the idea that Rand's going to get in front of a microphone after this,
they should.
There's no way.
Amy should talk.
Dude, should he talk? 100%.
Okay.
Will he talk? 2%.
Don't stop pushing, PK.
Stop pushing.
Don't give up. You're giving up.
I mean, have you not learned that Rand Carthon has no interest whatsoever in having a public face and accountability for anything the Titans do?
That was PK after the Ernest Jones trade, after the DeAndre Hopkins trade, but before Rand told the Tennessean that they lost the Lions game because the ball didn't bounce their way. LD from McMinnville texts into the text line and says, now that the trade deadline has passed, does Rand Carthon speak? I think it's a very fascinating question. And I will say this. Rand Carthon never does himself any favors when he holds a press conference. Have you noticed that it's only after the Rand Carthon press conferences or interviews that we have these just unbelievable cuts? Like, we checked every box from the number one starter to the furthest backup every time. We never have these Brian Callahan cuts that we play over and over and over and over again to highlight how out of touch with reality he was. Brinker, we make fun of his AI cancer curing model, but that's only because that's funny. Rand talks to the paper, answers like 5 questions, and it's an entire argument on the pregame show about whether or not he was actually talking about the ball bouncing their way, which, for the record, when you talk about the instances in which the ball didn't bounce your way in that particular game, I believe you're talking about the ball and not talking metaphorically. I'm not sure Rand does press conferences because I think Rand says a lot of things that get used against him after he says them. Now, I think that's a terrible sign to be a general manager and not be able to hold a press conference without saying something that everybody will then go crazy about when you say it or mock you for. But I think that's the truth. Do I think Rand Carthon should talk, given the fact that 45 minutes ago, and the trade deadline passed 40 minutes ago, but 45 minutes ago, ESPN was saying that the Cardinals were still in on Arden Key, and yet Arden Key is still a Titan? Should they talk about why they decided to keep Sebastian Joseph Day? Should he be asked to clarify his ball not bouncing their way comments? Does he mean the ball? Does he not? Should he hold a press conference? Of course he should hold a press conference. But the question was, will he? And I really thought he was going to, even though I was willing to bet Willie Donick that he wouldn't. I thought Rand Carthon was going to hold a press conference. Ian, I thought he was going to get bullied into doing one.
Bullied?
When everybody's like, well, are you a grown-up GM or are you not?
But he said this is, in season is not his time. He said that before.
I know, but he's also said when it came to the Byard thing that, maybe I should have. I think after that Tennessean article, I don't think you're going to hear from Rand Carthon. In fact, I'm going to say this right now. I do not think, I don't want to guarantee it because I don't feel strong enough about this to guarantee it, but I do think I can call it. I don't think Rand Carthon will hold another press conference as a Tennessee Titan. Ian, put it on the calling it list.
Okay.
I think that today was the last meaningful day of Rand Carthon's Titans tenure, the trade deadline. again, I'm not saying that I'm hearing anything because I'm not. But I got a vibe. You know, the way that they promoted Brinker, and then it was like, okay, what about? And then if he holds a press conference, I will say I was wrong. And we'll have to cross it out on the calling it list, which I believe I did hit the Patriot or the Titans beating the Patriots.
Yeah, you did.
On the calling it list. Didn't guarantee it, but did call it. But I think that I think we're done here in press conferences from Rand Carthon. That's my I do think that the Titans are going to fire Rand at the end of the year. And I'm not saying I'm calling for that because I'm calling for them to fire everybody. You know, again, I think the organization needs a total reset, not just a, one here, one there, one whatever. Somebody in the YouTube chat says Rand wasn't talking about the actual ball. Only Jared would believe this. Again, Chris Sanders kept saying that. Derek Mason kept saying that. TD said it on the pregame show. He was just referring. It was a figure of speech, which, again, sometimes I would be willing to accept. Where I have a hard time accepting it is when I kept asking Derek and Chris to read the quote and they wouldn't do it because the quote is this: the ball is not round. You don't know which way it's going to bounce sometimes. It's those couple of opportunities that we had in the game where we jar the ball loose, but it bounces right back to them. And then on the other side, it gets away from us. So you can't predict which way the ball bounces. I don't think that's a figure of speech. I mean, again, he's bringing up instances in the game where the ball did not bounce their way. So I have a hard time believing that he wasn't actually saying, no, fans, the reason we suck is because of bad luck, which is insulting and not true. But again, to me, when you reference moments in the game where you're arguing the ball didn't bounce your way on fumbles, you're talking about the actual ball. It's like, again, if it's tennis or if it's golf and you hit a shot and you hit it right in the fairway and then all of a sudden the ball ends up in a trap. It's like, you see the shot, everyone's like, oh, it's a pretty good shot. Oh, ball didn't bounce your way. In baseball, if the ball hits the chalk and it's a fair ball, you are 1 inch away from that double in the corner being miraculously foul and being strike number 2. That's the ball bouncing your way. Now, there are some times where you say things like, yeah, it just wasn't our day today, when the other team's better than you. That could be a figure of speech. But when you say it just wasn't our day today, we woke up at 8 in the morning and we were supposed to wake up at 10 in the morning and they didn't have blueberry pancakes at the team breakfast. And then all of a sudden our bus broke down on the way to the game. And then we got there and Johnson had a fever. And then Mordecai broke his leg. It just wasn't our day today. Well, I think you're saying like, hey, today it just wasn't our day. So when you reference the ball, I think you're talking about the ball, Henry. And he referenced the ball. So I have a hard time believing that's not what they were talking about. Mike in Lebanon says, has Rand ever talked to the press without mentioning his family? He always sounds like he's running for office. He always tells these anecdotal stories. When he did the same thing when he did the Tennessee Sports Council breakfast or whatever, and they made it a podcast with him and Brian Callahan, and he told a story about getting out of the shower before they signed Calvin Ridley. And he always tells anecdotal stories. I think that's just kind of his thing. I think that's just his personality. I don't have a problem with that. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. More of your phones. We continue. Stillman and Company, 1025 and 1063 The Game.
And I am thrilled to be joined by a two-time Super Bowl champ and former NFL general manager John Robinson, making his debut right here on HQ with us. And John, just given that this is our first time chatting, I got to start things off by picking your brain, if you will. I would love for you to just give us a little bit of insight into what it's like this time of year for that front office. You got the trade deadline staring you in the face, and you're trying to find ways to strengthen your roster.
Yeah, this next couple of days are going to be really hectic around the NFL and the offices. You've really got three categories of teams. You've got the teams that are buyers that are kind of in the hunt here in November, making a push in December, trying to play football in January. You've got the sellers, teams that are kind of out of it and looking to stockpile draft picks. And then you got the teams that are just kind of sitting pat, unless you pick up the phone and call. And they will listen to you. So I think that most of the staffs have done their homework and they know the players that are available. But really, it's about the GMs. I mean, the GMs are getting on the phone. They're texting back and forth, talking with ownership. It's a team decision. So it's the head coach, it's the general manager, and it's the owner when you consummate these trades. But it's on the GMs now to really pick up the phone and call and see which players are truly available. And try to craft the deal. I tried to make a deal my first year right at the deadline in 2016, and it got right to the end, and we just couldn't quite pull it off. But it was anxious times.
John Robinson on the trade deadline. Also, can you really say two-time Super Bowl champion? Yeah, he was in the Patriots organization when they won them, but it's not like he won them as a general manager. But I digress. So the Titans didn't make any moves today. I have to say, again, on the Arden Key front, and there was a lot of speculation surrounding Arden Key from the weekend of saying, hey, Arizona's called and some teams were interested. And then even up until 15 minutes before the deadline passed, there was a report that the Cardinals were calling the Titans about Arden Key. I was surprised they didn't acquire Arden Key or trade Arden Key. I was also surprised that the Titans didn't make a move on Sebastian Joseph Day. The 49ers need a defensive tackle. They ended up making a deal with the Texans for some guy I've never heard of, Khalid Davis, and they got a 2026 seventh-round pick. And I know you would hear that if that was the return and think, okay. But I figured after reading what Rand said in the Tennessean about the explanation for trading DeAndre Hopkins and Ernest Jones, and the explanation being that, hey, we needed picks so we can flip this roster. I figured if you're trying to play the narrative game, you'll trade those guys for whatever you can get so that you can put the message out there, put the narrative out there that, hey, we had to get a bunch of picks to revamp this roster. Because I didn't hear a lot of people look at that line in the Tennessean article in which he said, we went into the season with 5 picks, in large part because you traded a third for L'Jarius Sneed, but we went into the season with 5 picks, and now we've got 8. And I didn't hear anybody call bullcrap on the fact that one of those was a 7th rounder that they acquired from Malik, and Malik, in my opinion, has far outplayed the 7th round pick in his 4 appearances or whatever at Green Bay. So if you're trying to play the narrative, if you're trying to play the narrative of, hey, fans, we're getting draft picks, then you would trade Arden Key and Sebastian Joseph Day, try to pick up a 6th, try to pick up a 7th, and then say, hey, we got draft picks. Even if they're not good draft picks, you're trying to play the narrative game to survive. And I was a little surprised by that. Jeff says, Jared, you knew Floyd like we never did. I do know that he was not one to directly dress someone down and humiliate or embarrass them on air or elsewhere. Considering the success Floyd brought to the Titans, I would like to know what you are comfortable saying, what you believe Floyd would think about the specific problems with this team. Thanks. I'm not going to do that. And I'm not going to do that because I do not know. I have a pretty good idea on certain things, what he would or would not have thought. But if I go there and I start saying, well, Floyd would have thought, then all of a sudden I'm speaking for him. And knowing him as well as I did, and Ian, I think you know him as well as I did. We knew him incredibly well. We spent every day with him. The last thing that man would want in death is for me to be sitting there saying, here's what Floyd would have said.
Fair.
So I have a hard time getting there. I can tell you this. He'd be really upset. Like, I don't know if he would have been able to hold his tongue as much. Because, again, when we did this show, they never sucked that bad. Like, they never sucked that bad while we were on the air. Mike says, who's playing center for the Titans? I think it's going to be Daniel Brunskill. So at least they're getting some value now for that $3 million. But now there's a big concern with Lloyd Cushenberry having an Achilles that he may not be ready for next year, which is a humongous problem. One Dexter said, based on D-Hop's tweet about Rand being family, is it possible that DeAndre got traded early and cheap in order to get him to the Chiefs so they could compete? Because the Chiefs might not have paid what other teams got for a wide receiver. So here's what I would say to that. If the Titans decided to make the trade for DeAndre because of DeAndre, then they should be fired. Because their jobs are not to make DeAndre happy. Their jobs are to build the best football team you can build. And those aren't mutually exclusive, but one has to absolutely take the priority over the other one. So I don't think that they did that with DeAndre. I think the fifth was the best they thought they could get, so they just went ahead and made the deal. 615-737-1025. And I wonder if DeAndre's kind of crabby pants over there on the sidelines in the Buffalo game maybe played a role in all of that as well. 615-737-1025. So I have a really hard time figuring something out about the Titans. And it's something that we all want to happen, including me and even the biggest Jared Stillman says this crap to get people stirred up hater are, I think, in total agreement on this. And I don't know how they do it. We'll get to this next. Stillman and Company on 102.5 The Game. Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063, the game streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. Barry Trotz in 1 hour, and after that disastrous performance last night from the Predators, we have got a lot to get into with Barry Trotz on the program at 5 o'clock. But the trade deadline has passed, as you heard in Ian's update. They were inactive today, which means going into the draft, at least until the Super Bowl, the Titans will have 8 picks. They'll have their first, their second, their fourth, Seattle's fourth, their fifth, Kansas City's fifth, their sixth, and Green Bay's seventh. And I have a big question that we all want the answer to. But I think I've been doing this long enough, and I think I understand the NFL well enough to, for the most part, know how to solve problems. And if not solve a problem, I at least know the next step. Like, let's use Jacksonville as an example. Jacksonville is terrible. And I would argue the biggest reason they're terrible is not so much the bad play of the quarterback, which is a problem, but it's whiffing on the number 1 pick in 2022, taking Trayvon Walker when they should have taken Aiden Hutchinson. That right there absolutely bombed them from having a generationally great player, and instead they got nothing. That's bad. I also think their free agency, their strategy hasn't been great, and I also think their offensive line needs some work, and I'm not convinced their quarterback's all that good. They may have ruined them with that year with Urban Meyer. But I know what the next step for Jacksonville is. The next step for Jacksonville is to build the offensive line, and then it is to get Trevor Lawrence another coach. And they have got to see whether or not Trevor Lawrence can be saved by a coach. And if not, then they have to admit that Trevor is not the guy and start over. Again, I don't know if that's going to work or not, but that's what's next for them. When it comes to the Titans, I don't have an answer for how they get out of this mess they're in anytime soon, other than, again, cleaning house and bringing in some fresh ideas and fresh eyes into this current situation. If you want to get mad at John Robinson, you can. Now, one thing that bothers me is when people say, well, they didn't get anything out of the 2020 draft. Well, the 2020 draft is over. All those rookie contracts are done. So, yeah, I mean, it would have been great if they had been able to pick Justin Jefferson, which they weren't. He was off the board before they made, and then could have extended him. But they have players from the 2020 draft on their team. They have L'Jarius Sneed. They have Lloyd Cushenberry. They have Nick Westbrook-Akine, who was an undrafted free agent. Like, that draft's over. You want to get mad about 21 and 22, you can get mad about that. But you can't really get mad about 2020 anymore because, again, all those guys have been free agents. But again, this isn't about who to blame. This is about how do the Titans get good. They have 8 picks, but they only have 2 picks in the top 100. So then I asked myself, okay, how many young core players do they have to build around? Like young star players. I came up with 1, J.C. Latham. This kind of reminds me of the Titans in 2014. Again, they were 3-13 in 2015. But they had 1 good young player before Mariota showed up, and it was Lawan. Everything else was Bishop Sankey and Dorial Green Beckham and Jeremiah Patasi. And again, like, you had 1 good player, Lawan. And then 2 when Mariota came in. And not that Mariota was a good player, but he was a young player with potential that you could build something around. How many high-end, top-of-the-league talents do the Titans have on their team? I'd argue 1, Jeffrey Simmons. Harold Landry is not a top-of-the-league talent. And while L'Jarius Sneed in Kansas City was, L'Jarius Sneed's play here was not, and he's been injured. He's unreliable. I can't put him down there. Amani Hooker's not a top-of-the-league player. Kenneth Murray is not a top-of-the-league player. Nobody on offense is a top-of-the-league player. So they have one young player to build around and one player that's a starish kind of player. They have no answer at quarterback, and they are currently slotted to pick 9th in the NFL draft. We're told this draft has 2 first-round quarterbacks. Trust me, they'll be gone by 9. The expected available quarterbacks this offseason: Daniel Jones. Ian, I'm going to go through this list. You tell me if you want any of these guys.
Quarterbacks, okay.
Daniel Jones.
I mean, not really.
Derek Carr.
No.
Russell Wilson.
Maybe.
Geno Smith.
Maybe.
Joe Flacco.
Probably not. No.
Gardner Minshew.
No.
Justin Fields.
No.
Mac Jones.
Probably not.
I mean, that's what's out there. By the way, I would not be ruling out Mac Jones. Although, I'm not going to, if I was general manager, I wouldn't be like, Mac Jones! I wouldn't do that.
I mean, it's somewhat intriguing. Yeah, I'm not going to rule it out, but I'm not going to
Right.
hey, circle him.
Some people will say, well, what about Sam Darnold, Jared? I expect that Sam Darnold will be franchised by Minnesota, and he will either be their quarterback or he will be traded. And half the teams in the league need a quarterback. So if they tag Darnold and then turn around to trade him, there will be takers. And again, you don't have any young players. You can't trade your draft picks. So how do the Titans get better? How do the Titans get better? They'll have roughly $100 million in cash to spend this offseason, the difference between this year's payroll and the payroll next year. But as we learned this year, when you spend your money on running backs and injured corners while ignoring right tackle and using your premium picks on guards and run-stuffing defensive tackles, you kind of screwed. And the $100 million isn't going to make a difference. And this is where the Titans find themselves. They're in a deep hole. And the traditional ways of getting yourself out of this hole, they don't exist. You're picking 9th right now. There's not a quarterback there to take. There isn't going to be. The Jets were up a creek that, well, let's go get Aaron Rodgers. And that might have worked for them. But there's not going to be an Aaron Rodgers for you to get. There's not going to be a Phillip Rivers or a Tom Brady in free agency for you to put on the team. So the only way to be able to dig yourself out of this gunk is either for the players that are already on this team to get better, or for you to nail that 9th overall pick in a way that you haven't nailed a first-round pick right away since Javon Kearse, which isn't very likely. You don't have great draft capital. In fact, I did the math. I ran the numbers according to Draft Tech. I ran the numbers on what that win cost you if you end up picking 9th as opposed to picking 2nd. Last week, the Titans had a total overall value of somewhere around like 3,300 in draft points. Now they're, I think, like 1,600 points lower because every single pick is no longer the 2nd pick in the round. And because of that, the difference was the 8th overall pick. So you essentially lost a top 10 pick worth of value by winning on Sunday. So how do you dig yourself out of that? You can't make a trade from 9 to absolutely revolutionize your franchise where you pick up 2 1s and 2 2s and a 3 and a. You can't do that with the 9th pick. And I don't have the answers to this. And that's the problem. I'm not sure there necessarily is one. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. We'll get to your phones on that. Plus, there's something that Titan fans absolutely do not want to hear. In fact, people got mad at me when I tweeted this out. They get mad at me every week when I bring it up, but it is reality. And we'll get to that next. It's Stillman & Company on 102.5 The Game.
Well, it is kind of amazing. I said, after the Miami game, if he plays like he did in the Miami game, then that pick could end up being a steal for the Titans. And I don't know that I've noticed Devondre Sweat one time since then. It's kind of amazing how that's played out.
Yeah, it hasn't. He has not been as impactful. The guy who was unbelievable the other day is Sebastian Joseph Day.
Yeah.
My goodness. I mean, I guess you could look at it like, well, that's what happens when, guys who have to be doubled, then someone else should be taking advantage of it. And maybe there's some of that in that situation. But I'm with you. Sweat, you want to see a little bit more from him as things move forward.
Boys, we got a problem. And it's the big boy in the middle, Devondre Sweat. So I'm not trying to, I'm not trying to rile people up. I know people say, Jared Stillman. I'm not. But he doesn't do anything in the pass game. He doesn't affect the quarterback. He doesn't hit the quarterback. He doesn't sack the quarterback. And he doesn't play at the end of the game. He's a run-stuffing defensive tackle. So I keep going back every time we talk about the Titans and where they are and what they have to build around and I purposely leave Devondre Sweat off the list. And the reason I leave Devondre Sweat off the list is because he's not impactful. He's not important. He's like Skoronski. He's a guard. He's an interior defensive lineman who stops the run. And that's inexcusable out of the 38th pick. When they drafted him, there were questions about, at Texas, he didn't get a lot of sacks. And Brian Callahan said on draft night, they can develop it. He has 0 pressures over the last 2 weeks. He has no quarterback hits this season, and he has no sacks this season. He's been non-existent. And this is why people said, when you drafted him, people said, you reached. No, those guys are haters, and they don't see. Rand knows, and they know, and Mel Kiper Jr. said after the Titans picked Devondre Sweat, he goes, I liked him in the 3rd or 4th round, really more late 3rd, early 4th, because, again, Mel knows what he is. He's a run-stuffing DT, and you need that on your team, just like you need a punter. But you don't use the 38th pick on the punter. And before you tell me, well, Devondre Sweat does other things, because Twitter today was like, he's awesome in the run game, Jared. You don't draft that with the 38th pick. This is Rick Spielman, former Vikings general manager, on his podcast after the draft with the first pick when he was asked about Devondre Sweat specifically at 38. Here's what he said.
When you're picking in the 2nd round at 38, which is at the top of the 2nd round, usually, the question is, can this guy be a 3-down player or not? And if he's a 2-down player, then more likely you may get an opportunity to take a swing at him later, or maybe consider trading back and still getting him to get just some more draft capital.
Would you have taken him this high?
No.
Just on-field productivity only, would you have taken him this high?
No.
He's telling you, no, you cannot take this guy that high. You got to trade back. And again, the Rams took Braden Fisk, 1 pick behind. They traded with Carolina and gave up a 2nd in next year's draft in order to be able to do it. And Carolina moved back to 52. You should have made that deal. And I'm pretty sure you were offered it, because the Rams showed a video where they showed Les Snead calling and offering a 2 in next year's draft, and then going to Sean McVay and saying, yeah, they didn't want to drop that far. And then Brian Callahan, after the draft, said that, yeah, there were some teams that called, but we didn't want to drop so far that we were out of that realm of player. If you had the extra 2nd round pick in next year's draft, you'd have some ammunition that would really lead you to believe that you could build something up. But instead, the guys that run this team that draft guards with the 11th pick, they had to get a run-stuffing DT. Then they told everybody he could hit the quarterback. He doesn't hit the quarterback. Again, unforced error after unforced error by this Titan administration. And you can whitewash it all you want and say, I think that's the right way to say that, where you lie about something. You can lie about it all you want. And you can say, well, but he's good against the run. Great. You don't use the 38th pick on that. Phone lines driven by WilsonCountyHunter.com. John is up next here on our program. John, thank you for waiting. Go ahead.
Hey, Jared, thanks a lot, man. Let me just go ahead and say that this is a trash team with a DEI general manager. They need
Hey,
to be
man,
called
I don't
the
like
Tennessee
that.
Down syndrome.
Well, okay, I don't like any of that, to be completely honest. Whenever you say something like it was a DEI hire at general manager, you sound like a racist. Like, I'm just telling you. Like, when you say something like that, normal people hear that and think you sound like a racist. And I just want everybody to know that so that you don't say things like that because it's kind of embarrassing. So thank you, John. But again, like the Titans of this, they got to get it figured out. And I don't think Rand's a good general manager. And I mean, again, the resume that he had, you could poke holes in and say, well, he was never an assistant GM before becoming GM. But again, when people say that, I
don't even
I
know
think
if
it's
John
nuts.
was the guy's real name. So
yeah, I mean, again, I think that was just some real bottom of the barrel stuff right there.
sorry,
One
he
text
didn't
says
say that's what he was going to say when he.
that Rand was a DEI hire.
Yeah, he said something about Tannehill. He wanted to talk
Anytime you
about
say that about somebody, it sounds racist. Like, and I'm sure there are going to be people that are like, no, Jared, you don't. Just don't say that. You can say other things. Like you can say, Rand says a lot of dumb stuff, which he does. You can say they make a lot of dumb moves, which they do. You can say they signed injured corners, which they did. That's other stuff. Texture said, Titan fans need to buckle in for years of bottom-tier football because that's the only thing they can do. There's no hope for this team in the long term because the young talent we thought we had potential, but all of their flashes weren't substantial, and there's nothing to be excited about. Well, there's a left tackle. And again, win by 2016 and in the playoffs again in 2017. But that might be what you're looking for. Ryan says, if the Titans had accepted the Rams trade offer and taken Sweat later in the second round, would I have been okay with it? At 52. Yes. Again, I still, second rounders, I still want impact players, not run stuffing DTs, I want guys that play premium positions. But if you got an extra second out of it, I'm not saying Sweat could have been a bust and I would have been okay with it. But when you get an extra second out of it, it's hard not to like the trade. So that one I struggle with. One texter says, draft a wide receiver from Arizona, sign a top right tackle free agent, sign a bridge quarterback, and draft a quarterback next year in the draft. So that sounds great, except for the fact that there are no first-round quarterbacks except for the first two, and you no longer have the second or first pick. The bridge quarterbacks, we went over them. Congratulations, Daniel Jones, starting Titans quarterback. I have no idea if there's going to be a top right tackle on the free agent market. There wasn't this past year. And, again, I don't know anything about the Arizona receiver. I'm sure he's fine. But, again, all those things you want to do, like, they may not be there. Like, if there was a top right tackle on the market this year, I'm sure the Titans would have been interested. The truth is the Titans should have been interested in the top right tackle on the market last year in Mike McGlinchey, whom they decided not to sign, even though McGlinchey wanted to be a Titan. And at the time, they were like, well, the cap, and we didn't have the money, and we didn't. Oh. Okay. And that's the problem with this team is that they can't ever see ahead, which I think is probably an issue here. Jeff says, do you believe this organization can field a competitive team that can win 7 to 8 games by opening day in the new stadium? Yeah. I mean, the new stadium is 3 years away. So they've got 3 years they can fix it. By next year, which is when I want to be good again, or at least competitive again, or at least interesting again, that's going to be hard. 615-737-1025. Trevor is next on our program. I guarantee you, Trevor is going to think that Patriots game was a good thing. And if he does, I'll get mad. So we shall see. That's next. Stillman Company 1025 The Game. Stillman and Company. And I did the math today on what the Titans cost themselves in draft capital by beating the New England Patriots in overtime by 3 points at home, the worst team in the league. New England now has the number 1 pick, moving from 2 to 9. And it is the equivalent of an extra top 10 draft choice, what you can or cannot get. And also, let's not forget that, hey, you want to draft a quarterback? New England's quarterback, that's what a top of the line, draftable quarterback prospect looks like. Not, well, we got him in the second round and he's got a big arm, which is what you have right now. Trevor Maddich joins us on the program now, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. Trevor, I am down in the dumps about the Titans win over the Patriots on Sunday. It is shaking to my core that I now think the Titans may not be able to draft a quarterback in this upcoming draft. And I think the Titans are truly one of the worst, if not the worst team in the league. And I think Sunday was an indication of that, because they barely beat that Patriot team at home, and that Patriot team is awful, and they don't have Drake May. It was all bad across the board. Did you see it the same way?
Oh, I didn't see it the same way at all.
I knew it. I knew you were going to say that. Go ahead.
I thought the Titans played much better from a standpoint of execution. To me, this team the problem is not that they don't have enough talent to compete. I think they have enough talent to compete with most teams in the league, not the top tier necessarily, but with most teams in the league. The problem is they've been executing really poorly. I thought they executed better. They made fewer mistakes. They did more things up to the level of their capability against New England. Yeah, now New England is awful, but the Titans are also awful. And you could say that this was a game that went to overtime, therefore these two teams are equally awful. But at the same time, you look at the trajectory of the Titans, and the announcers during the game were talking about, and really the last several games have talked about how this team is not as bad as its record. Well, it is what its record is, because that's why the record is there. But I think what they meant to say is this team is not as untalented as their record. And so while they do have holes in the roster, and you have done a great job of pointing those out, I don't see this team as being in among the dregs of the lead from the standpoint of talent. I think that from a standpoint of execution, they've been there, and they got a little better from that standpoint against the Patriots.
So here's where I'll disagree with you. I think this is just basically, I think that it's the same. They played the same that they played against Detroit, except for Detroit's awesome and New England is awful. And I think it's, again, you talk about, well, they didn't make the same mistakes. They kind of did. They turned the ball over inside the 10-yard line. They fumbled it a couple of times. Now they were able to recover it. They did not score a touchdown on a drive that they had to go the length of the field after the opening drive, which meant that they had a scripted series. They score a touchdown. New England adjusts, and their touchdowns come off of a strip sack, which, again, when you're playing a team with no left tackle, it's easier to strip sack the quarterback. I think it's all about New England. I think this is a classic case in college football. If Penn State, for instance, were to get blown out by Ohio State, which they didn't this past weekend, they lost, but it wasn't a blowout. If Penn State were to get blown out by Ohio State, the Penn State fans would be furious. The next week, if they were to play Ohio Tech and beat them by 55 points, it's not like the Penn State fans would say, oh, we're back because we beat Ohio Tech. The Patriots are the Ohio Tech of the NFL. The Lions are the Ohio State of the NFL. To me, that's the difference, Trevor. How is it different than that?
I think that's fair, but I think the Penn State example is a good one for the Titans, because people are all down on Penn State because they can't beat Michigan when Michigan is on the way to winning the national championship, or when they're beating Ohio State for several years in a row, Michigan being one of the best teams in the country. They're saying that Penn State can't beat Ohio State. Therefore, they're not as good as Ohio State. Okay. But Penn State clearly has shown that they are not among the elite of college football. What they have shown is that they are very, very good, and they're in that next tier of college football teams, just not in the elite. Did they compete with Ohio State? Yeah, actually they did. They only lost that game by a touchdown this last weekend, even though their offense didn't score a touchdown. The only touchdown by the Nittany Lions was a pick six by the defense. At the same time, it was still a one-score game when it ended. And so it's not like Penn State is that far away. When you look at the Nittany Lions, what they need in order to elevate from where they are now, which is very good, to the elite level, is a quarterback that is accurate throwing the ball down the field and mobile all at the same time. They haven't had that combination really in memory. And so this current quarterback for Penn State, Drew Aller, big arm throwing it down the field. He's connecting better throwing it down the field than he was last year, but he's not mobile. He's not mobile. And so Penn State, if they had a guy like a Dylan Gabriel of Oregon, that kind of guy, then you would see this particular Penn State team be able to compete on a better level and even beat some of the top teams in the nation. So you can see the path for Penn State to go to the next level. And I think that's a fair indication with the Titans, except I wouldn't say that the Titans are in that next level down. I'd say the Titans are kind of in the middle of the pack when it comes to talent, with some clear holes that once they fill those holes, they'll be able to rise up when it comes to talent. But then it's execution that keeps them from even achieving to the level that their talent should allow them to achieve. And again, you and I texted back and forth a little bit early in the game against the Patriots, where their first punt, I think it was, the Titans punted the ball inside the numbers, so sort of more towards the middle of the field. And it turned out to be a big punt return. And the reason was that, just like against the Lions, the coverage team expected the ball to be punted accurately, which is to say, pin them towards the sideline. In this case, if you're covering the ball, to the left sideline, and then we can pin them all down there. So while they're covering and going down to pin into the sideline, the ball actually is more towards the middle of the field. The returner catches it and takes off towards the wide side, and there are not as many cover guys out there on the wide side of the field because they've already squeezed down expecting an accurate punt, right? And so it was a big return. So things like this continue to happen to them, and that's a matter of execution. And so once they start to execute better, they'll compete better. But I thought they improved their execution against the Patriots to the degree that at least they were competitive.
So again, I think they were competitive because the team they played sucked. Was the execution better when Mason Rudolph throws a ball, 5 inches too high for Chigakonkwo and it hits him square in the hands and he can't catch it and it pops in the air and they intercept it? Like,
that's a great example too.
When Detroit has better players and better coaches than the Patriots have, it leads me to, like, if Jared Goff had quarterbacked the Patriots on Sunday, the Titans would have gotten crushed. And I don't even think Jared Goff's that good. But Jared Goff is much better than Drake May at this point in Drake May's career. I mean, the Patriots are so stupid. They apparently, I was listening to Boston Radio yesterday, they took the wrong direction in overtime and had to go into the wind, which I guess they think might have been a problem on the last Drake May interception. I don't know. My point is, Trevor, I think this is a bad football team. And because they won on Sunday, I think they've decided that there's some false sense of hope, that it's proof that their process or that their credibility is intact, or whatever you want to call it. I think they're making more of this than somebody had to lose when the two worst teams play each other. It happened to be them this time. And I kind of feel like you're doing the same thing. There was what was good about the game where it's like, this is a tangible benefit that if you did this against a real NFL team, that it would show that you can compete.
I thought they ran the ball pretty well. I mean, they ran for over 160 yards against the Patriots. Now, the Patriots defense is not a brick against the run by any stretch, but still, with the offensive line that, as it was what it was, where they're rotating two bad left or right tackles in there, and they've got the backup right guard in there, then the center goes out, and all kinds of things. They still ran the ball for over 4 yards a carry. Tony Pollard was 4.5 yards a carry, the feature back, and those are things that are important. So they did that pretty well. You talk about the pass play down, at the goal line that tipped off of Chig's hands because it was thrown too high. It was thrown too high. You're right. That ball should have been thrown farther down low. And even if Chig would have caught it, there's no way he would have got into would have scored. He caught it It tipped off his hands about the 1 yard line or so, tipped up in the air into the end zone, and that's where it was intercepted by the Patriots. If he would have even reached up and caught it, there were still guys there that would have tackled him right where he was, I think. But at least they would have either had the choice to kick a field goal from there or go for it on 4th down and try to punch it in from there. Instead, they got no points at all and no chance at any points. But that's where we talk about execution by the quarterback to get that ball down lower where it's not tipped in the air if it is if it's not caught, and by the receiver to at least catch that ball because it did hit him in both hands. And Jake should have caught that ball, and there should have been a 4th down. And so in a play like that, in a close game, and most of them are, notwithstanding the Lions game, most NFL games are competitive to where they're within a score or two. That kind of play makes the difference. And so in this case, it didn't because the Patriots weren't good enough to do anything with it. So you're right about that. And I'm not suggesting, Jared, that this team is good. What I'm saying is that the pieces are there for this team to have a better record than it has. And I think you can agree with me that were it not for some really just inexplicable turnovers, decisions, and physical mistakes that were unnecessary by Will Levis early in the season, we'd be looking at a team that's closer to 500 and the conversation would be different. We'd be talking about now, how do they get to the next level? And so this is where I think fans can have hope. And this is where I think that the way the team has improved the roster from last year to this year, or really 2 years ago to now, I think is tangible. It's real, but they're not getting the best out of those players because of execution. Calvin Ridley, I think they should somehow find a way to insert in his contract a clause that says every game when you drop a pass, you lose half your game check that week. So two drops, you get no game check that week. He is dropping passes that are hitting him in the hands that are not contested over and over and over again. Now, I don't think he's a bad receiver. I think he's not executing. But those are the kinds of things that I'm talking about. So I don't want you to think that I'm saying that, hey, all's rosy and everything's great with the Titans. But I hear a lot of hopelessness out there about this team, and they're not in a hopeless place. They're in a place that they could improve dramatically to the level of a fairly average NFL team if they just stop dropping passes and doing dumb things that they do sometimes that cost them not just cost them a win, but cost them a chance to be even close.
Okay, hold that thought because I do have a follow-up to that. We'll do it next. Trevor Matters, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. Stillman & Company, 102.5 The Game. Trevor Maddox is with us, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. Trevor, you kept talking about if the Titans just executed better, or if they didn't do the boneheaded things better, or if they didn't this or they didn't that. Is that a reflection of the coaching when you think they have better talent than what they're executing on the field?
Yes. Yes, it is. It's either that or that the players aren't responding to the coaching. It's one of the two. And if the players aren't responding to the coaching, they got to get out. They got to get rid of those players. It's one of the reasons why this offseason I was pretty upset with one of the players on offense that didn't seem to be having mental focus like I thought he should have in practice. And I called that out, right? Well, getting the best out of players in practice and in the meetings is what leads to the games. And that's one of the reasons that, for example, Nick Saban at Alabama, I think is a great example, and people can relate to that. You can say the same thing with Bill Belichick during his heyday with Tom Brady with the Patriots. You watch those teams play, and they didn't beat themselves on game day. You saw them perform at the highest level that their talent would allow, each individual doing. I've talked a lot about how at right tackle, there's been plenty of times when sacks and pressures have been given up because guys have their technique has been so bad that they couldn't stay in front of a defender, so the defender would have to beat them. And this is part of the problem. This team, the way they play, the Titans, doesn't look like they practice with the kind of urgency that they need to individually excel at their job every single play. And I'm not saying they don't practice hard. I'm not saying they don't practice, sweat a lot and hurt a lot and all the rest of it. There's a mental urgency. And I'll go back to Tom Brady. I remember when he came out to Washington to practice with the Patriots against Washington. This was after I had retired now from the game. I'm out there as a broadcaster and I'm watching the difference between how Washington practiced and how Brady literally led the practice for the Patriots. Now, when it was time to work, no goofing around was tolerated. No lack of mental focus was tolerated. Every single Patriot player knew exactly what he was supposed to get out of every drill, every time. This is what I'm doing. This is why I'm doing it. And this is how I have to improve because this is my job. And that's one of the reasons that the Patriots won all those Super Bowls, because they were doing the right thing in the right place every time. And I'll just give you one stat. I'm not a big stat guy, but stats will paint pictures sometimes, right? And they'll tell you stories that are important. And this is turnovers. Right now, the team in the league that's given up the fewest turnovers is Washington. They've got 3 turnovers, right? Tennessee has 17 turnovers on between offense and special teams. That puts them at 31st in the league. Only the Raiders are worse with 19. When it comes to turnover differential, the Titans are 31st in the league, second to last, minus 11 turnover ratio. So if you want to know why this team keeps losing games, why other teams jump on them, especially jump on them early and then get momentum and go rolling downhill, is because the Titans are horrific at protecting the football, and they are not good enough at getting takeaways on defense. They're below average to getting takeaways on defense, even though statistically they lead the league in certain defensive categories like total yards given up. But they got to get takeaways too to help this offense. So how do turnovers happen? Turnovers happen because you're not securing the ball like you should. That's a habit. You secure the ball because you always secure the ball. It's famous that sometimes in high school and college, you'll see a ball carrier carrying a ball around as he's going to class because the coach makes him do it because it's not a habit yet to hold that ball high and tight and squeeze it. And from a standpoint of quarterbacks throwing interceptions will happen in the NFL. Mistakes will happen. Poor throws will happen. Bad decisions and not knowing what you're looking at and throwing the ball anyway are things that you can control. If you don't know what you're looking at, you're not quite sure what's up, and you throw the ball out there anyhow, and even though you haven't identified the defense and don't realize that a defensive lineman had bailed out in a zone blitz and he's standing right underneath the receiver you want to throw it to, and you throw it anyway, well, you deserve to have the ball intercepted. You need to know what your answers are when they're pressuring you, but you also need to know the answers are when you don't know what you're seeing, so that you don't put the ball in harm's way or guess what you're doing. The Titans are guessing too much. And it goes back to your original question, Jared. Is this because the players just can't physically do it? I don't think that's the case. So then does it come down to, are the coaches coaching it correctly? And that's where I think you're going to find a lot of room for improvement, because these players in certain fundamentals do not play like they are coached to execute the basic fundamentals at the highest level of their individual capability.
Trevor, quickly for you, one last one. If the Titans have fallen out of Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders' range, is there a quarterback in this draft that can save them?
Well, save them is an interesting way to put it. The answer to that would be no. I mean, there's some players that I think they could take a chance on, and as you get out of the first round and even the second round, then there's a lot less risk. But Curtis Rourke is one of those guys from Indiana that I think they could be looking at. You know, you could take a flyer on a guy like Dylan Gabriel out of Oregon, but he's kind of short. But at the same time, the guy's a playmaker, doesn't have a super strong arm, but he knows how to get the ball where it needs to go and he protects it well. So I think it's going to be a matter of matching their system with the right kind of quarterback. Rourke's a fascinating one to me. And I really kind of think that unless it's Shedeur, well, even Ward. If I'm the Titans, I'm a little careful about drafting a quarterback with that first pick. I think Shedeur has the best chance of all the quarterbacks to have a good NFL career, successful NFL career. But the Titans should not reach for a quarterback. They have enough problems that they should get the best position player if there's not a quarterback that absolutely deserves to be drafted there.
Trevor Mattish, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. Trevor, great stuff. Appreciate your time. We'll talk next week.
Thanks, Jared.
Yep. The Predators dropped a big one last night, and Barry Trotz will join us next as they have hit the road. And boy, do they need the road, because they've not been great at Bridgestone Arena. We'll do that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. The Predators last night, it was ugly. 3-0 LA, 16 shots. According to MoneyPuck.com, the Predators currently have a 26.2% chance of making the playoffs. And again, I don't think any of our expectations this year were not making the playoffs, but it is early. 4-7-1, not the end of the world. This is not my first rodeo. I have covered a lot of NHL teams, 2 teams that have made it to the Cup final, and I've seen teams that look terrible get hot and go on a run, and I've seen teams with 100-point-plus seasons get smoked in the playoffs. But I'm starting to get worried. I'm starting to get worried at the 5-on-5 game. I'm starting to get worried at the new guys that have come in here, and what Stamkos is not doing at 5-on-5. I'm starting to get worried about some of the guys last year that played pretty well, surprisingly, that maybe haven't been that great this year. Barry Trotz joins us on the program, Predators general manager. The Predators are in Washington, D.C., and Barry Trotz is presented by Pourvu. Be ready when the puck drops in Smashville with your drink of choice in hand, and they have the most friendly experts throughout the store that welcome your questions and will help you find your perfect selections, expand your tastes, all while valuing your time. Barry is in D.C. with the team, I assume. Barry, thank you for joining us. It's a tough one last night. How concerned are you at this point in the season with where the team is and what the team is not doing in terms of turning a corner?
Yeah, I'm concerned like you and every fan out there. I mean, it's been a little bit of a process, and it's like playing whack-a-mole. You fix one problem and another one tends to pop up. But I would say, yeah, I'm concerned. I should be, because our record's not what I think it should be. We've been inconsistent. The only area that we've been very consistent has been in the penalty kill. The power play has given us a chance to get some points. Last night, I don't think it gave us much of a chance, but our penalty kill did. I thought last night, LA is playing good hockey, and they also know it's a 4-point game. I thought they came out and played a real structured game. Didn't give us a lot of room, but at the same time, we didn't work and execute to get a lot of room. I thought the first period we were a little sluggish, slow out of the gates, which seems to be a trend for us this year. I thought in the second period we were much better, and after 2 periods, I think the shots were like I think we were like 15-12 or 15-13, something like that. They were both low on both sides. And then we give up, which seems to be a habit, giving up a goal early. And the concerning thing about the goal is we'll make a turnover or not execute a play, and then there's a little bit of panic setting in. Instead of just relying on a little bit of structure, we sort of panic, and that for a team that's a little older, it needs to be reeled in. That it should be a little more calm. I always say, but it's like anything, you got to play the odds. You got to have layers of resistance, and when things break down, then you don't panic. You just you play the odds. You don't allow them to throw pucks across the crease so that they can increase their percentage of shots. You let them have outside shots. And the other thing that's concerning me, obviously, and most fans, is our 5-on-5 game. Offensively, we are very perimeter. I think last year we were a top 3 team in interior shots or slot shots. This year, I think we're 31st. And if you're not on the inside, you're not going to score in this league. I mean, we lead the league in shots, I think, of the number of shots taken. But they're low percentage shots. You're taking 30 low percentage shots, and they have 1 in 30 chance to go in. Where you get into the interior, you got a 1 in 10 chance that they go in. And we are been perimeter. I'm been concerned with the group as not only the existing players that played well for us last year, but the new guys that have come in haven't adjusted their game enough to be consistent. The one area that I do believe that our game has gotten better is in terms of our defensive game. We were giving up 5 goals a game. Saros was playing good good goal, but we're still giving 5 goals up a game. We've got that down. I think we've got it to an area where we are going to be competitive every night and have a chance to win. But now we've got to find the other end of our game, and that's a little more of the offensive game. So it's been a grind. A lot of the, with an 0-5 start, even if you win your next 5 games, I mean, other teams are playing games and they're still winning their games. Once you fall behind, you have to look at short term, be it 3-game segments, 5-game segments. And so, we started 0-5, we went 3-1-1, and now we're into sort of the next 5-game segment, and we're 1-1. We just got to make sure that every of these shorter segments be on the positive end, because any team that you're chasing right now, they're playing hockey, and if you can gain 1 game a week on them, it may take 5 weeks before we can get back on even ground. So I've talked to some of the players on that, and they have to realize that you're not going to. The poor start has forced us to probably grind it through for the next couple months just to get back on even ground with everybody.
So I'm not going to ask you the cliche question of, how close are you to hitting the panic button kind of thing, but I do wonder, how close are you to hitting the time for Barry Trotz to do something? Because when a general manager decides to do something massive, there is no walking it back. It's easy to be on the radio one day and to say, hey, you should trade for this guy. And then the next day say, well, we shouldn't trade for that guy. Once you make the trade, you make the trade. Once you fire the coach or you bring in somebody, once you do that, it's done. How far away are we from the Barry Trotz hitting the time for him to do something massive button?
Well, I think, we get on the road here a little bit. I'm trying to do some things right now. We will be limited a little bit because of some of the contracts that we do have. If we don't get it going, then I'm going to start our rebuild plan a little bit. What we did in the summer was, as I say, fantasy hockey until we become a good team. If we do not become a good team, then we're going to see a lot more of our kids starting their process. Like I said, we brought in the veteran players to extend this year and be a threat. I think I use the term, and then hopefully in the next coming years, our young guys come in and they take a bigger role. So that if we fall out into a position where we fall out and it's not happening or it doesn't come together, then I'm going to start probably that process, and you're going to see some kids and we'll start our process on getting them the needed games that they need and start developing them and still trying to win because we've got some good players. But we're gonna shake it up if we don't get going pretty soon for sure. Because it's a cultural thing. I don't like losing. I didn't come here to lose. That's why we tried to do the things that we did this summer.
So it's fascinating you say that, because when I watch the games right now, we've talked about this numerous times. It feels like you have 5 top 6 forwards, and there's a giant hole at that second line center position.
Yeah.
And again, just my assumption of it would be, okay, you're limited a little bit by cap space, but you could maybe trade a contract and a deal. You got the picks to be able to trade. And we're not at the point yet where teams are giving up on the season, but that's not going to be that far away. I figured the next step would be for you to go get a second line center to say, okay, I'm putting you with Stamkos and Marchessault. And it sounds to me like you're actually kind of thinking the opposite, which is, if this doesn't work out, I'm not going to try to patch a hole here. I'm going to try to take it in a different direction. Is that fair?
Well, yeah, I think it's just like anything. When I took over the club, I said, you've got to assess where you are and be realistic. I said what I did in the summer. Number one is, Brady Shea went in for McDonough. We lost Sherwood, Trennan, and Glass, three players. Sherwood ended up being a pretty valuable guy towards the end for us, but he only played half the games last year. And I really started clicking at the end of the year in that role that he was. You see, we put Zach LaRue in there. That whole fourth line, to me, our identity has started with, we had the O'Reilly line going. They seemed to be the one that carried us last year. And then we got the McCarron line. That fourth line was the one that really drove our team last year, and this year that fourth line has not drove it. I thought they had a good game against Colorado. We got to build some momentum with that, and then we've got to get that second line center, or maybe Steven Stamkos has to go in there as a second line center because he's played center in the past, and we start using some other people, and just Steven's our second line center until further notice or something like that. I'm going to leave that up to Bruno, but we've got to get that stability. Our lines have been flip-flopping left and right for a long time. It's hard to get chemistry. I think that Steven and Marcia are players that are they're not one-dimensional, but they're not they have a certain skill sets that help a line achieve offense. They're both been 40 goal scorers. We need Philip Forsberg play that big heavy game, so his skills will flourish. And if we get all those pieces rolling, I think we'll be fine. And I will still tweak the roster, but if it's just not happening for us, then you have to be realistic and start getting some of your kids in and start building. Because every year I want to bring some kids in, and if it's not this year, then it's going to be next year. So we're not giving up on the season yet. Don't misread what I'm trying to say. I think we've got to give these guys a chance to do something on the road here a little bit in the next couple of weeks. We're playing good teams on the road. I thought, as we talked in our last meeting on the air, I thought we became a little stale at home. This schedule-wise, a lot of home games. We got our home game should be something that you relish, but at the same time, when you're home for as long as we have, you get into that rut, Groundhog Day, if you will, and it's not a big advantage. Actually, probably this team hasn't come together. Players and teams solve problems a lot of times on the road because they're going out for supper together. Their lines are going out. They're going out as groups. They're talking about stuff. They just have more free time when they're on the road to sit and take care of these problems. Where maybe at home, when you're home for a long time, you go to practice, you do your meetings, and then you're heading home, picking up the kids from school, doing all the things that parents do, and you don't really spend the time that you do on the problems of your game or your line or your defense pairing or the power play. The coaches are in there racking their brains, going through film, talking to players, trying to give them roles, teaching them the systems. They're doing all that, trust me. And it has to come from the group. The 20 players have to pull it together. And it's, they can. We've got good people. There's not an issue in our dressing room. Everybody gets along really well. But once in a while, maybe one of our leaders got to say, "Hey, stop this." We're good. We're better than we're playing. And I think you saw a comment, I think even last night, you could tell on, say, Ryan O'Reilly, who has as good a self-evaluating person as you're going to have. He just said, I wasn't good, and that didn't allow us to win. But he wasn't the only one. Some of his teammates have to have a little more of that as well. So I'm going to let this group figure it out. That's part of their jobs as professionals. And we've got to get our noses dirty. We're not going to score any goals being a perimeter, the perimeter Preds. We got to, we score goals by going to the net and going those hard areas. And that's what we did last year. That's why our team had good success. This year it's trying to, I want to say, pass the puck in. We had 40 goal scorers last year, and they're all trying to pass the puck. All I know is they finish well and they shoot the puck well. So, and a lot of them do it from close in areas. So they need to get their noses dirty and finding ways to help 5-on-5. And that's not by cheating. That's by playing the game the right way and doing the right things. And we're going to have to get inside. We're going to have to get our noses, dirty. I thought last night was a pretty physical game. I mean, there's a few scraps. There wasn't much room on both sides. I mean, LA is a good hockey team. They didn't give us much room. We didn't give them much room, especially in the second. And then the third was to start the period, with a goal with 30 seconds in. That was, it ripped the heart out of us. And then we tried to get fancy. We got frustrated. You saw, guys like Marshall and Stamkos look frustrated because they couldn't find their way a little bit. So they will. That's not the first time they've been frustrated.
Barry Trotz is with us, presented by Pourvu. I am actually a believer like you are. I think this road trip that's upcoming, not just the one with Washington and Florida the next couple of days, but when you guys hit the West Coast and you guys are gone for basically 2 weeks, I think that is probably going to be a good thing for the team. The question I have for you, though, is you did say, hey, I'm not giving up on the season yet. How long? I keep waiting for this team to turn the corner, and I almost felt like Saturday night. I thought, you know what, hey, if they get this LA game and then they get on their way, and then it felt like a step backwards against LA, how long will somebody like you wait before deciding, okay, I've seen the inconsistencies enough?
Well, I think, I'm going to take, we got through these first 10 games. I'm going to sort of wash that out, the first 10. I want to see that our game grows from, last game. I heard great things. I saw Saturday. I was scouting out in Minnesota, which I saw 5 of our prospects, and I watched our game the next morning, and I really liked our game. You could see a lot of the old Predator ways, things that you saw and liked last year were there. So that was a step forward. And then last night I knew it was a grind, but I didn't like our third period and our response. Our response should have been, okay, we just shot ourselves in the foot. All right, don't feel sorry for ourselves. Let's dig ourselves out again. And this team has, but we can't. It is very hard mentally when you're chasing the game all the time. I think only twice that I can remember this year that we actually scored first. And you look at the odds of winning hockey games goes down quite a bit when you don't score first. So I like the resiliency because we have to fight back from a number of being down, 2 or more goals this year, it seems. But at the same time, I didn't like our third period response. And I didn't like the fact that we're so perimeter right now. So we need to get in and get ourselves a little bit dirty again. And I think that's what our fans, that's part of our identity is that we're not scared to get our noses dirty, and we're not scared to go to the hard areas, and we will compete at a high level. And that I didn't feel that way in the third period. I did it during the game. The first 2 periods, I thought we were okay, but I knew there wasn't much room out just because of the systematic play on both sides. There wasn't a lot of room for both teams. But the third period, we didn't have enough push. So that was extremely disappointing to me. And you can tell it hurt some of the leaders. Our guys were not happy at practice today, and they shouldn't be. But they know, and they can feel some of that pressure, and this is about the time the older players know that if it's not going good, if you're in the last year of your contract, then the rumors start. Young guys are wondering if they're part of that. It never is good energy. So I've talked to some of the players, and I said, hey, you gotta put anything that we did in the past. It's got to go away, and you've got to look forward, and you got to put your focus on looking forward here and have good energy. I didn't know because the frustration and the the energy that's consuming you from pressure and all that, it just sucks all the energy out of you. So you got to wash it away, and you got to look forward. It's almost like playoffs now.
Barry, is there a problem that the team might be too nice? I mean, I hear you talking about what Ryan O'Reilly said yesterday, where Ryan O'Reilly put his hand in the air and he said, I was terrible, and that's one of the worst games I ever played. And And I sense that was something that stood out to you, and it stood out to us as well, that Ryan O'Reilly would say something like that. I mean, these guys, Yossi and Forsberg and Saros, they've been here long enough. They'll never say something that will ever cross our desks as controversial. It's just not in their nature. And Stamkos, I mean, I didn't cover him because I wasn't in Tampa or anything like that, but I can't even remember anything controversial involving him. And I'm starting to wonder a little bit if when you talk about the leaders, it's kind of like of course they're frustrated, but are they too nice to hold one another accountable, in that sense? Is that kind of maybe a frustration of yours?
No, not yet. I think with guys like Ryan, I think one thing that he's surrounded, I think, with last year, Ryan McDonough is a Grizzly veteran and Ryan's a Grizzly veteran. They would always, Roman would always, defer to them in terms of, what do you think and all that. Ryan's not here, and right now Stammer and Marshy are both new guys and they're leaders, but they're not going to probably speak up right now because their game is not where it probably needs to be, and they know that. So it's hard to stand up and call your teammates out when your own game's not going. So and we don't have that many guys that have their game going right now. I mean, we've got some great leaders. I mean, a guy like McCarron for us, he brings a lot of energy. He was a healthy scratch. His game hasn't been where it needs to be. But when his game is on, he has a big effect, and he has a voice in the room because he knows his game's going. And guys like Lazan and Carrier, they have no problem. He's saying let's tighten up our bootstraps here and let's go. They don't have any problem doing that, but it's hard to when your game's not going. You better be on a heater, or you better be going really well for you to call the guy out next to you who, if you're not going, if you're -8 and not producing anything and inconsistent in your game, and it's hard to call your teammate out if your game's not in order. So we're probably nice right now because a lot of guys don't have their game in order. But when we start getting our game in order, I don't see any problem at all.
Last one for you. Barry Trotz is with us on the program. The Preds are in Washington, where they'll play tomorrow night. Andrew Burnett had a quote yesterday about frustration, saying frustration makes you think you're actually working when you're not working. Frustration actually makes you a poor teammate. Frustration is contagious. So those are some of the pretty bad things that's kind of leaked through our group right now. What exactly does that mean?
It means body language. It means, when you're frustrated, you're like, you're looking at your teammate, just that little look like, sure. Oh yeah, I was open and you didn't get the puck. You see it I see it in all sports. You see it, receiver is open and he's waving his hands and he's giving the quarterback a look. I mean, it's sort of the same thing where your quarterback's like, I got some guys chasing me around here, and I'm sorry if I didn't see you, but don't make a scene. I didn't see you, and some guys do that, and it rubs guys the wrong way. So I think body language, especially from veterans, and it angers me when I see veterans not dealing with or dealing with frustration poorly, busting their sticks, slapping the puck against the boards, things like that. That bothers me because if it's okay for them to do it, then it's okay for a young guy like Luke Evangelista or Tomasino or Parsonen to do it, and they think it's he did it, so it's okay to do it. It's like having if a leader's not working hard in practice, and the young guy thinks it's okay. That's how it's supposed to be. No, that's not how it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be you're a true leader. You've got to take that. Now, during the season, you're going to get frustrated. You go through a dry spell or whatever. You just can't outwardly, continuously, scream at the world. And sometimes you got to, turn all that frustration into. There's a difference between frustration and determination. And some guys go, they get frustrated and they lose their determination. When you get frustrated, you should gain determination. And that's the difference between the two for me.
Yeah. Barry Trotz in Washington. Barry, thank you so much for your time. Good luck. And if I'm doing my math right, if it's a 5-game span, then you've got 2 tomorrow and Thursday and then Saturday, and that would end this 5-game stretch. So
Yeah.
good luck tomorrow and good luck Thursday and good luck Saturday, and then we'll talk Tuesday.
All right. Sounds good. Keep up the good work, my man.
Absolutely. Barry Trotz joining us on the program presented by Porvu. 615-737-1025. I got some reactions to that. And I'll tell you, Barry Trotz never holds back. I was a little stunned. I don't know if you guys were watching the stream when Barry said, hey, if this isn't working out, like we're gonna start the rebuild. Like, whoa, what? I've got some thoughts. We'll do it next. Stillman and Company, 1025 The Game. Got to tell you about Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Proud supporters of the Nashville Predators. Trust me about that. You see that Hiller logo right there on the ice. Hiller is giving away cash for the holidays, and they are celebrating from now until the end of the year with special deals. Hiller wants to make sure every child experiences the joy of Christmas this year, and they're donating $50 in Toys for Tots for every tankless water heater purchase and giving away a $250 Visa gift card with each unit. Get a $500 Visa gift card when you buy select new HVAC systems, or get a $500 Visa gift card with the purchase of any new whole home generator. More deals are online at happyhiller.com. And as always, Happy will be here. The service is free. And these deals are only available until the end of the year, so schedule today. And let me say this, the Hiller Cash for the Holidays promotion, I mean, I think I've been telling you about Hiller for 6, 7, 8 years, something like that. We've done this every single December. It is a moment to me where I'm like, oh my God, we're down the home stretch of the year. And they keep doing it because it is so popular. So take advantage of these deals and help those kids experience the joy of Christmas. That's happyhiller.com.
And that's going to do it. The LA Kings shut out the Predators here tonight. So the Predators shut out for the second time this season. The Detroit Red Wings managed that feat on the 12th of October. And the Kings take this one by a final of 3-0.
Yeah, it's not good. And Barry Trotz knows it. Barry Trotz on our program saying he is as concerned as every fan. And then I asked him, I say, look, I don't believe in the cliche of, Coach, when are you going to hit the panic button? But this morning I was thinking like, okay, when is it officially time to hit that button and to say, okay, all right, something's got to change around here? So I asked the question, how long until you hit the Barry Trotz has to do something button? And he said, if we decide that this isn't working out, I will play the young guys. We will start the rebuild. I was kind of shocked by that because the Predators are limited in their movement as far as their contracts are concerned, which we know, whether it's no move clauses or long-term deals with big dollars for older guys, etc. But it sounds to me like Trotz is like, that's fine. Stamkos, you'll be on a line with Svechkov. See how you enjoy it with a rookie out there. And I think there were some messages that Barry Trotz was sending today. I think the first one is he's going to give these guys, I did the math this morning. In fact, I think I've got it pulled up in front of me. As far as the road trip that they're about to go on is concerned, because they're going to Washington and Florida, then they come home Saturday. Then they go on the road, the CMA road trip, Colorado, Edmonton, Calgary, Vancouver, Seattle. And Barry said after they started 0-5, he's like, we need a road trip. Because road trips are where guys bond. They're where guys are staying in the same hotel. There's no families. There's no kids. There's no, I got to go over here and do this. There's none of that. It's kind of everybody together. When they take off for Colorado for that West Coast trip, it's the 50 people on that plane. They're all in it together. It's a different feel. And I know what he's talking about. So I think he's going to say, hey, let's see how this little mini road trip, Washington and Florida, let's see how this goes, and then let's see how the big road trip goes. But after that, that's where you come up against U.S. Thanksgiving, and it would not surprise me to see Barry Trotz start making changes then. Now, I'm not going to talk about changing the coach because I don't think Barry has any interest in changing the coach in a sport that does change the coach very quickly. So the first message is get it together or we're putting the young guys in. And we're putting the young guys in to develop them for the future. And we're not going to be worried about competing for a cup right now, which takes some serious cojones to be able to say. Because it's basically admitting that I thought this was going to work and right now it's not. I'm going to give it some more time, but eventually I've got to throw in the towel on it. Now, he says he's not ready to do that yet. The second thing I thought that I was kind of surprised by was he talked about the leaders on the team. And I said to him, I said, are you guys, a little too nice? And I said this because I would say that I probably know Roman Josi well enough to tell you that a lot of the things you guys see on television, that's who Josi is. He is genuinely a good dude. But I do wonder, I've always wondered if Josi can get up in somebody's kitchen the way that, again, we assume a captain does. And I talked to somebody years ago, off the record, who would know. And Ian knows who it is. So, Ian, I think you can co-sign the fact that this person would know.
Probably so, yeah.
And I said, what's Josi like as a captain? And they told me, hey, whenever there's a conversation that needs to be had, Roman Josi's willing to have it. Whether it's a tough conversation, whether it's a... And once I heard that, it kind of put me at ease that, hey, he can... And then I hear Barry start talking about, hey, Ryan McDonough and Ryan O'Reilly last year, those guys were the grizzled veterans and those guys were, and that... I'm like, And then I asked about, hey, are these guys too nice? Is it hard to, hold these guys accountable. And he brought up the fact that, hey, these guys aren't playing well. Stamkos, Marchessault, O'Reilly, Yossi, Forsberg. If you're not playing well, it's hard for you to look at somebody else and say, you need to start playing well. Which is why I think Ryan O'Reilly said what he said yesterday. Robbie tweeted out last night after the game. He was in the locker room and said, I've never seen Ryan O'Reilly like that before. Now, O'Reilly's only been here for a year and a half. But the number one step to being able to hold others accountable is you have to hold yourself accountable first. That's why it's not an accident that Ryan O'Reilly went to the press and said, I sucked. Because now he's probably going to start telling other people, you suck too. And then Trotz, and I wasn't at the game yesterday, and I was flipping between the game and Monday Night Football and everything else. But Trotz was talking about that frustration quote when it came to Andrew Burnett saying frustration makes you a bad teammate. And he was talking about the actions of, banging your stick or slapping the puck. And if an older guy does it, then the younger guys see that and they think that's how to act too. And Robbie texted me, again, he was covering the game. Robbie texted me and said last night, Roman Yossi slammed his stick on the crossbar. So maybe that's not a subtle hint at what Trotz is talking about. So it seems to me like the guys Trotz is most upset with are the guys that have done, are the guys that they're paying a lot of money to, that they kind of built this thing around. They didn't build this team around Steven Stamkos. They built it around Yossi and Forsberg. And even the guys he talked about, Lazan. I mean, Jeremy Lazan, I did not think Jeremy Lazan was an NHL player before last year. I thought he was a third-pair defenseman on an average team. And all of a sudden, he's played with Carrier last year, like top 4 minutes. And they played like a top 4 pair. And I was like, oh, okay. I didn't think this was possible. Well, Lazan has gone back to that, of being a fringe NHL player. And I heard when Trotz was saying, it's like, hey, he can't tell anybody what to do. He's got to get his game up. McCarron, he's a leader with that team, but he's got to get his game up. It's time to step it up. So I think there are some messages being sent to guys that are, hey, man, don't get too fat and happy around here. I think there are some serious messages that Barry Trotz sent, and I think he did it on this program. And I was a little surprised to hear that, hey, if this thing doesn't work out, I'm tearing it down. Well, he didn't say tearing it down, but starting the rebuild by playing the young guys. I was a little stunned by that. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number on the program. We'll get some phones. Plus, speaking of rebuilding, the Titans at the trade deadline today did nothing. What do we make of it? Stillman & Company, 102.5 The Game.
Yeah, we've sensed it for a while, and we just can't seem to correct it and get over it. I think I've talked about it enough here over the last couple of weeks about how it's a dangerous emotion, and it's getting the best of us, and it's kind of unfortunately leaked through almost the whole team. And frustration plays tricks on you. Frustration makes you think you're actually working when you're not working. Frustration actually makes you a poor teammate. Frustration is contagious. So those are some pretty bad things, and that's kind of leaked through our group right now.
That was Andrew Burnett yesterday, and then we asked Barry Trotz, what exactly does that mean? He says, well, when you're busy slamming your stick, it's not helping you get better. Let's go to your phones as promised. Scott has been waiting patiently. Phone line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Scott, thank you for calling. Go ahead.
Yeah, I know you said you didn't want to go there, and I hope you're right that this was as much messaging as it was Barry's thought process. That, there's the old saying, it's a lot easier to fire the coach than it is to fire the team. And, I mean, they made a huge investment, $130 million worth of contracts. That's not rebuild mode. I mean, it's the sad thing is it's been done a lot in the past and it's worked. St. Louis was in last place and they changed their coach and they won 90% of their games and won a cup. And Edmonton was in the dregs last year and changed the coach and went to the final. So I know he doesn't,
this question, Scott,
doesn't want to put that out there and wants to message to the players first, but it has to be something he's at least considering. I don't want it to happen. But
I hear what you're saying. But my question would be, take Barry Trotz out of this, because I think whatever I would do or you would do, Barry Trotz would be times 100, because I think he's always going to protect the coach before other GMs would. When would you start to think about it? Because even if it wasn't, I'm not saying like that they'll do it, because I don't think they will. But again, calling it how it is, like if they should do it, I'll say I think they should do it. I don't think they should do it right now. When would that moment be for you that you would be like, okay, I've got to change this?
Yeah, if you're going to make a change like that, the time to do it would be before the long road trip. So if they look as bad in the next 3 games as they did last night, then that's what I would consider doing that. And then you've got a new coach on the road with the team. Let's get into bunker mode. That would probably be the time to do it.
Okay, so I guess I would say that I think that you at least have to thank you, Scott. You at least have to get to Thanksgiving. You at least have to get to U.S. Thanksgiving before. I think you have to get to U.S. Thanksgiving, which would be at the end of this road trip, and then they got a couple of home games in there. I think you've got to get to U.S. Thanksgiving before you make any massive major changes. Before we even start thinking about it, talking about it. I think that, again, the money that you gave these guys, the expectation level, I think that is let's see if they can change this up. I wouldn't do it before the road trip. I wouldn't play that card then. The one thing I don't want to do, because I've heard people do this when it comes to the Titans. They'll say, well, the Titans should do that, but they'll never do that. So then they just stop talking about it. And I don't believe in that. But what I will tell you is Barry Trotz's not going to fire the coach. In other places, they would fire the coach, because this is a fire the coach sport. That what Scott just said in other places might happen. It's not going to happen with Barry Trotz. And quite frankly, I don't think it should, because I think Andrew Burnett's a good coach. Just like when Laviolette got the boot, I thought that the problem was the group. I didn't think the problem was the coach. And I know, and the caller's right, it's easier to fire the coach than it is to fire the team. But I knew that bringing somebody in that just said nice things wasn't going to change stuff. And I knew Peter was a good coach. I feel the same way about Burnett. But there's no doubt that it is easier to fire a coach than it is to fire a team when everybody's got long contracts and, no movement clauses. Preds Insiders will pick it up next. Stillman and Company. We'll see everybody tomorrow at 2.